of Dreams by V.C. Andrews. Read by Cynthia Nixon.
Luke and I passed through the tall wrought iron gates that spell out Farthingale Manor. Patches of rust have broken out along the letters like a skin rash, and the pounding of sea storms and winter winds have bent the gates back. Now they lean against the somber gray skies, and the great house itself looks oppressed, weighed down by time and the heavy and bleak history that lives in its hallways and grand rooms. Luke squeezes my hand. It has been years, centuries, it seems, since we have been here. The dismal skies are appropriate for our arrival, for this is not a nostalgic journey. We would rather not remember my stay here, my imprisonment, I should say, after the dreadful accident that took my parents' lives. But our journey is sadder yet. The funereal air is correct. We have come to bury my real father, to put Troy Tatterton finally to rest alongside his true love, my mother Heaven. He had remained in his little cottage all these years, continuing his intricate artistic work on the wonderful Tatterton toys, leaving only for special occasions like the births of my children. But whenever he visited us, no matter what the occasion, he could never stay away from Farthingale long. Something always called him back. Now he will never leave. Even though the great house looms forever in my nightmares, and the memories of those tortured days remain remarkably vivid still, once I look upon this grand estate, I understand why Troy had the need to return. Even I, who have every reason not to, feel a need to re-enter the house and walk through its long corridors, up its great stairway to view the room that had been my cell. Luke doesn't want me to go inside. Annie, he says, it's not necessary. We'll wait for the burial ceremony to start and greet whoever there is to greet outside. But I can't help myself. Something draws me on. I don't enter what was my bedroom. There are cobwebs everywhere, and everywhere there is dust and grime. I shake my head and walk on, pausing at Gillian's suite. The famous suite Tony had kept up with a fanatical urgency, refusing to face up to Gillian's passing and all that had gone with it. The suite has always intrigued me. It intrigues me now. I walk in, look up at the mirrors without their glass, gaze at the clothing still draped over the chairs, the toiletries still on the vanity table. I pass it all slowly, moving like one through a dream. And then I stop at Gillian's desk. I wonder if there is something in the drawer that Gillian might have written during her days of madness. Curiosity takes hold of me and I open the drawer. I blow away the dust and peer inside to see blank paper, pens, and ink. Nothing unusual, I think. And then I spot the cloth bag toward the rear of the drawer and reach in. There's a book in it. I take it out slowly. Leigh's book, it says on the front. I hold my breath. It is my grandmother's story. I open the first page and find myself falling back through time. On my 12th birthday, I opened what would be my most precious gift, this book for memories. At the last moment, Daddy slipped it into the small mountain of wonderful and expensive gifts he and Mama had bought me. I knew he had put it there himself after Mama had arranged everything, because she was just as curious about it as I was. Daddy usually left the buying of gifts completely in Mama's hands, just as he left her in charge of buying things for the house and buying all my clothes. He said Mama was an artist, so she would know better about color coordinations and designs. But I think he was just happy not to have to go to department stores and clothing stores. On a few occasions when I was younger, Daddy bought me models of his steamships, but Mama thought those were silly gifts for a little girl, especially the one that you took apart to learn about the workings of the engine. But I couldn't help being intrigued and very interested and played with it all the time, except when Mama was around. Daddy had the surprise gift wrapped in light pink paper with birthday candles painted in dark blue that spelled out Happy Birthday all over it. Just knowing he had bought it for me all by himself made it the most important gift there. I tried not to rip the paper as I unwrapped it. I loved saving things like that, mementos of all my special occasions, like the candles from my 10th birthday cake, the one that was so big it took both Clarence the butler and Svensson the cook to carry it into the dining room. I took the book out slowly, and ran the tips of my fingers over the cover, over my name. I just love the feel of the butter-soft, rose-colored leather cover with the gilded edging, and I especially love seeing my name in print, written like the title of a book. Leigh's book. I looked up with excitement. Daddy, dressed in his dark gray three-piece suit and tie, stood back smiling, standing there the way he usually stood with his hands clasped behind his back, rocking on his heels like an old sea captain. Because Daddy was the owner of a big luxury ocean liner company and was on one ship or another so often, he said he spent more time on the water than on the land, and he was used to rocking. "What is that?" Mama asked when I opened the cover to blank page after blank page. "I call it a log book," Daddy said and winked at me. "Captain's log. Keep track of the major events. Memories are more precious than jewels," Daddy said. "It's just a diary," Mama said, shaking her head. "Log book. She's a little girl, not a sailor." Daddy winked at me again. Mama had bought me so many very expensive things. I knew I should pay more attention to them, but I clutched the book called Leigh's Book to my heart and got up quickly to kiss Daddy thank you. He knelt down and I kissed him on his rosy cheek just above his gray beard, and his shimmering rust-brown eyes brightened. "Thank you, Daddy," I whispered. "I'll write about you all the time." There were so many things to write down, so many private and precious thoughts, I couldn't wait to do it. Mama was anxious for me to unwrap the other gifts. There were a dozen cashmere sweaters, silk blouses and gold hoop earrings, and a matching bracelet splattered with diamond flecks from Tiffany's. There was Chanel perfume and scented soaps, as well as a pearl comb and brush set. And lipstick. I was finally going to be able to wear it, lightly, of course, and only on special occasions. But I had my very own. Mama thought it was horrible of my father to rush off to his office on my birthday morning, but he said he could take Mama and me to dinner, so I forgave him. There was always one sort of crisis or another for him these days. He blamed it on the commercial jet airline travel that was increasingly cutting into the luxury ocean liner business. Mama always criticized him for how much time he spent working, and this made it all worse. I looked over all my wonderful presents, squealed with delight, and hugged her. She vowed she was always going to make sure I would have better birthdays than she had when she was growing up in Texas. Even though her family wasn't poor, she said her mother, my Grandma Jana, was as austere as a Puritan minister. She had told me over and over the sad story of how she wasn't even allowed to have a doll when she was a little girl. And she said her sisters, both older, were just like her mother because they were both so plain-looking. They didn't care about being feminine and having dainty and beautiful things. According to Mama, her hometown in Texas was so dusty and dirty, you had to take a bath after a walk through Main Street. It didn't take Daddy long to win Mama away from all that. I made her tell me the story again and again, never minding that each time she told it she added something new or changed or forgot something she had told me before. The main part of the story was always the same, and it was one of the first things I wanted to put into my book. "Don't you ever get tired of hearing about that?" Mama asked, throwing me a quick look. "Oh, no, Mama. I think it's a wonderful story, a dream story. No one could ever write one as beautiful," I said, which made her very happy. "All right," she said, sitting down at my vanity table. She began to brush her beautiful hair till it shone like spun gold. "I lived like poor Cinderella did before her prince arrived," she began as always. "But it wasn't always like that. I was the apple of my father's eye. He was a foreman in charge of everything at a nearby oil field, a very important man. Although he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty when he had to, he was a very elegant man. I hope someday you'll find a man like my father." "Isn't Daddy like him then? He doesn't mind working on his ships, getting down in the engine room with his men?" "Yes," she said dryly, "he doesn't care. But I want someone different for you. Someone who is a real executive, who orders men about and lives in a mansion and—" "But don't we live in a mansion, Mama?" I protested. "Ours was the biggest, most luxurious townhouse on the street, a classic Georgian colonial. All my friends loved my house and were especially impressed with the dining room because it had a domed ceiling and was encircled by Ionic columns. Mama had had it redone 2 years ago when she saw one just like it in one of her art magazines. Yes, but I want you to live on an estate with acres and acres of land and horses and pools and dozens of servants and its own private beach and... Her eyes grew soft and dreamy and far away as she conjured up this wonderful mansion and grounds. It will even have an English maze. She shook her head as though to clear it of its daydreams and began to brush her cascading hair again with long, graceful strokes. Your father had come to Texas on some business venture, and my mother, who was trying to mingle with the blue bloods, met him at a dinner and invited him to our house, intending for him to fall in love with your Aunt Peggy. But when he set eyes on me... She stopped and sat back, looking at herself in the mirror. Mama always had the smoothest skin, not a wrinkle daring to show itself. She had an elegant face, a face that you could find on a cameo or on the cover of Vogue. She had shining blue eyes that revealed her moods, brightening like Christmas lights when she was happy, cold like icicles when she was angry, and soft and sad like a lost puppy when she was unhappy. When he looked at me, she said to her own image in the mirror, his heart became an instant slave to my beauty. His eyes were fixed on me all night, and every time I spoke, even if it was to say please pass the salt, he would stop whatever he was saying to listen as if my words were pearls of wisdom. She sighed then, and so did I. How wonderful, I thought, to have such romantic memories. Did you fall in love with him right away, too? I knew that answer, too, but I had to hear it again, because I wanted to get it right for my book. Not right away, although I did feel myself turning to him more and more. I thought he had a funny accent, you know, that Boston accent, so I was intrigued with everything he said. He was distinguished and had the look of a successful businessman, confident of himself, but not stiff. He wore expensive clothing and had a thick gold pocket watch with the longest gold chain I had ever seen. I didn't know anything about the sea or his business, having lived in Central Texas all my life, but he talked on and on about his growing steamship line. He asked to see our gardens, and before Grandma could get Peggy to guide him, he turned to me and asked if I would do so. You should have seen their faces then. Of course, I agreed to do it, and after we walked out into the warm Texas night, and he began to speak softly, I realized Leigh VanVoreen was more than a stuffy New England businessman. He was rich and clever and handsome in his own way, yes, but he was also very lonely and very taken with me. So taken that he actually proposed that first night. We were standing by the baby roses. I thought you were on the swing and it wasn't until the second night. No. It was by the roses and it was the first night. The stars. The night was bursting with stars. It was an explosion of light above us. It took my breath away, she said, putting her fingers on her throat softly and closing her eyes as if the memory was too much for anyone to bear. I held my breath. Tonight she had told the story better than ever before. She's making it special for me because it's my 12th birthday. How wonderful of her. Maybe she changed the story from time to time because, as I got older, she thought I could hear more and more. She looked at my memory book. Are you going to put all this in there? Oh, yes. All my most important memories. Did you ever have a diary, Mommy? Never. But that's all right, she added quickly. I have my memories stored right here, she said, pointing to her heart. Some of them I have told only you, she said, her voice so low it made my heart skip a beat. She trusted me more than anyone. I won't ever keep secrets from you, Mommy. I know you won't, Leigh. We're too alike, you and I, to hide anything important from each other, she said, stroking my hair with her fingers. You're going to be a very beautiful young woman someday soon. Do you know that? I want to be as beautiful as you are, but I don't think I will. Just follow my directions, do the things I tell you to, and you will be very attractive. Will you promise to do that? I promise. Men, especially men of position and wealth, like to be seen with women who are stunning. It strokes their egos. Suddenly her soft face became something cold and hard. Always remember, Leigh, women can never be as promiscuous as men. Never. My heart began to beat madly. She was about to discuss the most intimate things. It's all right for men to be that way. It's expected. They want to prove their manhood, but if a woman is that way, she will lose everything important. Nice girls don't go all the way, not until they're married, she added. Promise you won't forget that. I promise, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at herself in the mirror again, and her ice-hard expression melted into my sweet, pretty mother once again. I have another surprise for you, she announced. Something more? But you and Daddy have given me so much today. It's not another gift, Leigh. It's a trip. A place I want you to see, she explained. I'm taking you with me this weekend. Where? To that mansion I told you about, the one called Farthingale Manor. Where you're painting the murals in the music room, I asked. She had told me about it very quickly one day. Mama was doing illustrations for children's books, working for Patrick and Clarissa Darrow, the husband and wife owners of a publishing company here in Boston who were neighbors of ours. Their decorator, Elizabeth Devereaux, was hired to do some work on a fabulous mansion outside of Boston. Mama and Elizabeth were good friends, and Mama had accompanied her out there one day and made suggestions which the owner apparently loved. She said Elizabeth then asked her to carry out the order, which was to paint murals depicting scenes from fairy tales, something Mom had been doing on the covers of books. Yes, I'm more than half done, and I want you to see that as well as meet Tony. Tony? Mr. Tatterton, the owner. And I want you to see this estate. If you would like to go, of course. Oh, I do. I can't wait to see what you've painted. I was hoping Daddy would come along with us to see Mama's murals, but even though it was a weekend, he had to go down to his office. He usually spent Saturdays there and often a part of Sunday afternoon. Usually we had a driver take us places, but this time Mama wanted to drive herself. We left the city and headed toward the ocean. Farthing? What's Farthing? Oh, she laughed again, a thin, short laugh, the kind of sound people make when they are thinking of something quite private, something only they or someone close to them would appreciate. It's Tony's nickname for his home. I told you, it's called Farthingale Manor. It sounds like a storybook palace. Only in stories do people name their homes. Oh, no, Mama explained. People with histories, with houses that have histories, really do name their homes. You'll see other grand estates, and I hope you'll meet these sort of people more often now. The sun was just over the tops of the trees, and as we made a turn to the right on a private road, the rays lit up an enormous wrought iron gate that arched overhead and spelled out with ornate embellishments the words Farthingale Manor. I gasped at the imps and fairies and gnomes that peeked out between the iron leaves. I did feel as if I were entering a special place, a magical kingdom. Even before I saw the great house looming ahead, I understood Mama's excitement. Our townhouse in the city was large and luxurious, but there was something different about having acres and acres of land with fields and hills and great fences around you. Farthingale Manor, I whispered. Those words had an enchanted ring to them. It was as if uttering them changed the world around me. The grass did look richer, greener, and thicker here. Along the way I had seen many trees that had already lost their autumn gold and brown leaves. But the trees on the grounds of Farthing still clung to their precious leaves, made more precious by the way the sunlight caressed them and lit them like jewels in the bright light. I saw at least a half-dozen groundspeople raking, trimming, and nurturing plants and saplings. Elsewhere, workers were trucking wheelbarrows of landscaping stone and dust. There was such a sense of activity and life on the grounds. It was hard to believe that we were at the end of October and approaching winter. Riding down the driveway, I felt as if Mama and I were re-entering spring, as if we had turned back time or entered a kingdom that had never experienced a bleak, dreary day. And then I looked up at the great house and thought I was right to think of this place as a storybook realm. The huge building made of gray stone did resemble a castle. The roof was red and soared, forming turrets and small red bridges connecting portions of the high roof that would have been inaccessible otherwise. I could imagine the views from the windows on the upper floors. Surely you could see the ocean from there. Mama drove up to the wide stone steps that led to an enormous arching front door. Almost instantly, an attendant came around to open her door for her. He was a tall, dark man, perhaps only in his early 20s. He wore a chauffeur's uniform and took his hat off as we stepped out of the car. "Good afternoon, Miles," Mama said. "This is my daughter, Leigh." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Leigh," he said, and nodded. Before we reached the door, it was opened by the butler, a very tall, thin man with a sad, deeply creased face that made me think of Abraham Lincoln. He had his thin, dark brown hair brushed back and lying flat with a part neatly at center. He moved so slowly and so softly, he made me think of an undertaker. "Good afternoon, Curtis," Mama said. "This is my daughter, Leigh." Curtis nodded, his eyes down as if he were greeting royalty, and then stepped back to let us enter. "Mr. Tatterton is awaiting you in the music room." "Thank you," Mama said, and we moved down the enormous entryway. "He's only in his late 20s, but he looks like someone's grandfather," she whispered, and then giggled. Mama was acting more excited than I'd ever seen her, almost like a little girl or someone my very own age. It made me nervous, almost scared, but I didn't know why. I only knew I wanted her to stop, to act like a mother again. I caught a glimpse of a grand piano. We stopped at the doorway of the music room, and I gazed up at the domed ceiling arching overhead. There was a tall ladder with scaffolding hanging just at the point where the painting still had to be completed. So far, Mama had painted a bright blue sky with terns and doves flying. At the center was a man riding a magic carpet, and just ahead of him was the drawing of a mystical air castle, half hidden by clouds. That had yet to be painted. I looked at the murals on the walls and recognized some of the scenes because they were pictures she had done to illustrate various children's books. The far wall consisted entirely of a shadowed wood, with sunlight drizzling through and winding paths leading into misty mountain ranges topped with castles. "What do you think?" she asked softly. "Oh, Mama, it's beautiful. Just beautiful. I love it." I had been so entranced by the murals and paintings on the ceiling, I hadn't noticed the man sitting on the small sofa with an elaborately decorated frame. The sofa was facing the doorway, so that he had been looking at the two of us while I had been turning in slow circles, my breath caught, my eyes wide, gaping in awe. "Oh," I said, retreating a step closer to Mama. I couldn't help blushing with embarrassment. The handsome young man with the brightest blue eyes I had ever seen laughed. He was dressed in a burgundy velvet smoking jacket and dark slacks, and had thick, richly dark brown hair. His lips were full, and even I could see they were more than a little sensual, and his face was as tanned as a movie star's. I thought he had an air of elegance and celebrity about him. When he stood up, I saw that he was strong-looking with wide shoulders. He was tall, maybe an inch or so taller than Daddy, and had long, graceful-looking hands. There was a power emanating from him, and a confidence and certainty he seemed too young to possess. "Forgive me," he said, "but I had to look at the two of you freely for a moment. There is no question this is your daughter, Gillian. She has inherited your joie de vivre, and her eyes sparkle with your exuberance." I looked at Mama to see how she reacted to such lavish compliments. Oh, she seemed to blossom under them, like a flower in a warm summer rain. "This is Mr. Tatterton, Leigh," Mama said, not taking her eyes from him. Mr. Tatterton, I was astonished. From the way Mama had spoken about him, I just assumed he was a much older, gray-haired man. I thought all millionaires somehow looked like the men in our history text, the Rockefellers and Carnegies, stuffy old men who cared only about Wall Street or cartels and monopolies. I looked at Mama and saw from the brightness in her face that she was very amused with my reaction, and that she liked Tony Tatterton very much. "Hello, Mr. Tatterton," I said. "Oh, please, please call me Tony." He gazed at me with a sharp, penetrating look that made my heart pound, and brought a warmth to my neck. "First things first," he said. "I'm sure you want a tour of Farthing." "Me too," I heard a small voice cry, and turned to my left to see a small boy with dark, inquisitive eyes as big as $50 staring up at me from the corner of the couch. He had obviously been hiding behind it. He had the same dark brown hair that Tony Tatterton had, and he wore it long but cut neatly around, making him look like a little prince. He was dressed in a dark blue sailor suit. "Come over here, Troy," Tony Tatterton urged, "and let me introduce you properly." "Come on." The little boy hesitated and continued to stare up at me. "Hi," I said. "My name's Leigh. Want to shake hands?" He nodded quickly and stood up to rush over. "Well, we can see that Troy has already developed good taste at the age of 4. Troy is my little brother," Tony explained as I took Troy's little hand into mine. "I suppose you might say I'm more like a father than a brother to him, since both our parents are gone," Tony added. "Oh." I looked down at this cute little boy and felt sorry for him. He looked as fragile and as tiny as a small bird that had fallen from its nest and lost the warmth and care of its mother. There was a longing in his eyes, a cry for someone warm and loving. "You want to go on the tour too?" I asked, and he nodded quickly and reached out for me to take him into my arms. I hugged him to me and lifted him. "Great," Tony said. "Let's tour the house and then go outside and see the pool and the horses. After lunch, we'll take a walk to the beach. But Leigh can't carry you everywhere, Troy. You're too big and heavy now." "It's all right," I said. "I'm sure Troy will want to walk by himself soon anyway, right, Troy?" He nodded and studied me closely. Tony laughed and he and Mama let us out. Perhaps no room in the big house was as impressive as the dining room. It was as big as a banquet hall with the longest table I had ever seen. I put Troy down for our walk up the marble staircase. He was anxious for me to see his room. All the bedrooms upstairs were really suites, each with its own sitting room. Troy's sitting room was so filled with toys it looked like a toy store. "Hasn't your mother told you about my business?" Tony asked, seeing my astonishment. I shook my head. "You mean she didn't tell you you were going to see the king of the toy makers?" He and Mama looked at each other as if that were a private joke. "Why would she call you king of the toy makers?" I asked, while Troy went to his pile of toys to pick something special out to show me. "It's how we built our fortune," he said. "I can see you have been a deprived child not to have ever been given a Tatterton toy. Jillian, you should be ashamed of yourself," he kidded. "Please, I have enough trouble getting her father to buy her the proper things for a young girl," Mama replied archly. Tony and she stared at each other for a moment as if they had discussed this before, and then he turned back to me. "Our toys are special, Leigh. They are not ordinary toys made of plastic. What we make is really meant for collectors, for wealthy people who cannot grow up and forget they are no longer children. Perhaps some still regret their memories of being poor when there was barely anything under their Christmas trees or anything for their birthdays. Do you see the castle with the moat there?" he said, pointing to the far left corner of Troy's bedroom. "That was handmade by one of my craftsmen. If you look closely at it, you'll see the detailed work. Each toy is only one of a kind, so each is special and valuable. Those who can afford it set up their own kingdom, you might say." I walked over and looked at the castle. "There are even tiny people, servants, peasants, lords and ladies," I exclaimed. "Are all your toys so perfect?" "Yes, they are, or I won't let them be sold." His velvet sleeve brushed mine as he stepped beside me, and I caught the rich scent of his expensive cologne and aftershave. "And we make games, too, but games that are so difficult they keep the best minds intrigued for hours and hours." He looked at Mama again, and they smiled at each other like before, like they shared a private joke. From Troy's room we went to the other suites, each more luxurious and larger than the last. The bathrooms were big and ornate, with brass fittings and tubs as big as small pools. Mama and Tony Tatterton walked ahead of us when we went outside to tour the grounds. They spoke so low when they talked to each other, I couldn't hear what they were saying. But I probably wouldn't have heard anything anyway because of Troy. I held his hand as we walked along the pathways, through the landscaped gardens and lawn toward the pool and cabana, and he began a remarkable monologue for a little boy his age. "Boris, the garden man, is going to make little trees grow there," he said, pointing off to the left. "The flowers are dead, but after the winter, Boris says he's going to plant more. He's the boss of the maze, too," Troy said, obviously very impressed with that. "The maze?" He pointed off to the right, and I saw it. The walls of hedges looked 12 or 13 feet high at least. "How far does it go?" I asked. "All the way down there," Troy pointed, "and to the little cottage." "Little cottage?" He nodded, and then let go of my hand and ran up to Tony, pulling on the bottom of his smoking jacket. "Leigh wants to go in the maze! Leigh wants to go in the maze!" he chanted. "All right," he told his little brother. "You can take Leigh into the maze. Enter just over there," he said, pointing, "but don't go beyond the first turn," he instructed me. "It can swallow you up." I took Troy's hand, and we walked across the grounds to the maze. I saw from the precise, careful way little Troy entered it that he was quite taken with the maze. There was suddenly an expression of reverence and awe on his face. He held my hand tightly, and for a moment I felt as if I had entered a church. It was so quiet. Even the chirps of the small garden birds sounded distant and faded, and the melancholy cries of the seagulls flying overhead were muffled, far away. The hedges were so tall that at one point they shut off the warmth of the sun and cast long dark shadows on our path. Yet I found the maze serene, quietly beautiful and mysterious. We arrived at the first turn, and I looked down the next pathway that had branches leading off right and left, presenting choices that could lead a wanderer around in circles or eventually to a destination. The maze had a way of tempting, drawing, daring any intruder to solve its secrets. "Have you ever gone further in, Troy?" I asked. "Oh, sure. Tony takes me to the cottage sometimes. He can go right through," he said, illustrating by zigzagging his palm in front of me. Then his mind switched excited thoughts instantly, and he started me back toward the entrance. "Come on. I'll show you my pony, Sniffles, and you can ride him, okay?" I followed him out, my laughter trailing behind, left to fade in the shadows of the maze. "Tony, Tony," Troy cried. "Leigh wants to ride Sniffles, can she? Huh? Can she?" "Leigh really isn't dressed to ride a horse, is she?" Tony asked. Mama snapped her fingers. "I knew there was something I forgot. I was going to buy her a riding outfit for her birthday." "Her birthday?" Tony said. "Oh, that's right. Yesterday was Leigh's birthday." He winked at Mama and stepped forward. "I knew there was some reason I was carrying this," he told me, and took a small box from his jacket pocket. It was wrapped in gold foil with a black ribbon tied in a bow around it. I untied the bow and unwrapped the small box. Then I opened it to look upon a gold pendant in the shape of an ocean liner with a gold necklace. There were 2 tiny diamonds on the pendant, one atop each smokestack. "Oh, Mama, look," I said, holding it out. Mama shook her head and smiled. "Beautiful." "Look at the back of the charm," Tony said. I turned it over and read, "The Princess Leigh." I looked up quickly. Tony gazed at me with those intense blue eyes, and it made me feel older. The feeling made me blush, and, my heart racing, I looked down just as quickly as I had looked up. "Anyway, I hope you like it, Leigh," Tony said, almost in a whisper. "Oh, I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much." I looked at Mama, who nodded, and I knew she wanted me to kiss him. Because I hardly knew him, I felt funny doing it even though he had just given me a very expensive gift. But Mama looked as if she expected it, and I wanted to do everything right, if not for myself, then for her. Tony anticipated the thank you kiss. He leaned toward me and turned his cheek toward my lips. I kissed him quickly, but closed my eyes and inhaled the scent of his aftershave. He was really the first man other than Daddy who I had ever kissed. I couldn't stop my heart from pounding. It made me feel a little dizzy. I hoped he hadn't noticed. It was so much easier just being a little girl. I almost wished I could return to being just that. but I knew time and fate weren't about to let me go back. Lunch was wonderful, and Tony made it into such a formal affair. For dessert, there was a peach melba. I was so full I looked forward to the walk on the beach that Tony had promised us. Mama changed into her smock and stayed behind to work on her murals. I couldn't believe how nervous I was without Mama to accompany us. I was so afraid I would say or do the wrong thing and embarrass her as well as myself. Troy ambled ahead of Tony and me, wobbling on his little legs, his pail swinging back and forth with his determined arm movements. "He's so cute," I said. "Yes," Tony replied in a sad voice. "It's been hard for the little tyke. He was very sickly at birth. There was a time there when we didn't think he would make it." "Oh, what happened to our parents?" I nodded. "Our mother died a year and a half after Troy's birth. She had a rare blood disease. My father passed away a year ago next month, heart attack." His eyes went from a warm sky blue to frosty ice. "It happened in the maze, and unfortunately little Troy was with him at the time." "Oh no," I cried. "It's been hard for Troy, of course. No nanny I can hire can replace a mother, and no matter what I do, I can't substitute for a father. I can't spend enough time with him, not the kind of time he needs. Right now I have a woman doubling as nanny and maid, Mrs. Hastings." "Here," he said. "We just go over this hill. Troy's already on the beach." As soon as we walked over a little knoll, we confronted the ocean. It was breathtaking the way we just stepped up, and there it was, the vast Atlantic spread out before us. Troy was down on the beach already digging. The beach went on in both directions. "All this is your private beach?" I asked in amazement. "Yes. Do you like it here, Leigh?" he asked, gazing at me with those sharp, penetrating eyes again. "Very much." "I'm glad," he said. He smiled at me with so much warmth in his eyes, his stare almost drinking me in. How old was he, I wondered? At times he seemed so worldly, so very wise, and at times he seemed no older than a high school boy. "It's a lot of responsibility running an estate this size, and a business that's growing in leaps and bounds all by yourself," he said. "And with a small child to look after as well," he added. "For someone so young," I said. It just blurted out. He laughed. "How old do you think I am?" "I don't know. 20? 23. 23, I thought. Mama was nearly twice his age, yet she seemed only a few years older, if that. We had a nice walk. Troy and I went searching for seashells while Tony lay back on the beach, his hands behind his head, his eyes closed. By the time we returned to the house, Mama had cleaned up and changed again. "We have to start back to Boston," she said. "I'd like to get home before dark." Troy lowered his head in disappointment. "Leigh will come back another day, Troy. It's not nice to act this way in front of guests," Tony instructed. As I was getting into Mama's car, Troy looked up at me, tears building up in the corners of his eyes. I knelt down and gave him a kiss on the cheek. He touched his cheek, thought a moment, and then gave me a kiss on mine, before turning around abruptly and charging up the steps to go back into the house. "Isn't Tony wonderful?" Mama said as soon as we pulled away. "He swears we look more like sisters than a mother and daughter." "Do any of your friends' mothers look like me?" she demanded. "No, Mama." It wasn't the first time we'd had this conversation. I didn't understand why I had to keep telling her she looked so beautiful. "I don't intend to ever look old," she declared with determination. "How old do you think I look? Go on, tell me what you think." "I know how old you are, Mama. I was talking to Tony and—" "You didn't tell him how old I was, did you?" she demanded, her face suddenly screwed into an expression of panic, her eyes glittering at me. "No, he just told me how old he was." "Good," she said with relief. "He thinks I'm only 28. 28? But Mama, he knows I'm 12. That would mean you had me when you were only 16. "So?" It was very common in the South, Texas especially, for girls to get married at young ages. "Now, let me think about this bon voyage party your father wants to have for the Caribbean cruise. If I don't plan out this party, your father will make it look like a funeral. She became silent for most of the remainder of our trip home. The cruise was going to be very exciting. Daddy had initiated a new Caribbean vacation voyage in hopes of stimulating more business. Primarily it was a cruise to Jamaica, and he had made plans for us to go on the commencing voyage. We would leave next week on the luxury liner Daddy had named the Jillian, in honor of Mama. When Mama stepped out of her suite on board the Jillian to attend the ball, I thought she looked stunning. She wore a strapless black Christian Dior original that had a charcoal gray-colored velvet fur strip diagonally across the bodice and a billowing skirt. She wore her Tiffany necklace with the oval diamonds and matching oval diamond earrings and bracelet. It was as if she were about to be crowned queen, and I was to be one of her ladies-in-waiting. I couldn't help feeling self-conscious in the dress she had picked out for me. It, too, was strapless, but I didn't feel as secure, even with a form-fitting bra. The dress was a deep, dark blue with a billowing skirt, under which I wore layers of crinoline. Daddy was dressed in his tuxedo. We took our places at the ballroom's great entryway to greet everyone. The ballroom was enormous, with burgundy velvet wall hangings draped from the high ceiling, and there was silver and gold-colored molding everywhere. Food was provided in buffet style on tables organized by courses. Salad tables, soup tables, tables with duck, prime ribs, chicken and fish, and a table devoted to desserts. Waiters and waitresses in Caribbean garb, the women wearing colorful headpieces, served hot hors d'oeuvres and glasses of champagne. On the stage was a 16-piece swing band with a female singer. They began playing as soon as the guests began to arrive. There was an immediate air of festivity around us. Never had I seen so many fancy-dressed people, even on our other voyages and bon voyage parties. Tony Tatterton was one of the last to arrive. He looked so tall and handsome in his elegant tuxedo. He came toward us quickly, a small and amused smile on his sensual lips, and his cerulean blue eyes sparkling. "Cleve, I would like to introduce you to Townsend Anthony Tatterton, who you've heard me speak so much of," she said. Daddy scrutinized Tony quickly, and then smiled as warmly as he had smiled at everyone else. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Tatterton. Thank you for giving my wife employment she enjoys." Daddy got right into conversation with people, and I wandered about. Then I decided to have something to eat. A little while later, I spotted Mama and Tony entering the ballroom together. Tony went off to speak to some people, and Mama joined me at my table. "I was showing Tony the ship," she explained with a giggle. "How do I really look tonight, Leigh? Do I look prettier than any woman here? Have you seen anyone who looks younger or more beautiful?" She seemed almost in a frenzy. "Mama," I began, but she didn't hear me. Even across the vast room, she and Tony seemed to be able to communicate, for she turned to me to say she would see me later and hurried off to join him. By the time the horn was sounded for visitors to depart, the ship's staff began to clear away some of the tables. I joined Daddy, who was speaking with the captain and the first officer, just as the band announced its final number, which was to be a waltz. Suddenly, I saw Daddy's eyes grow small and his lips tighten so that a whiteness formed under them. When I turned around, I saw what had caught his attention. Mama and Tony were practically the only couple left dancing, and they were dancing so gracefully and so closely, all the remaining guests and visitors had their eyes on them. I couldn't help but feel sorry for Daddy because Mama and Tony did look so beautiful together, moving as if they had been dancing together for years and years. I hadn't realized until this moment how young she looked in contrast to Daddy. The years between them had never seemed so vast as they suddenly did. Somehow or another, your mother is always the life of the party, isn't she, Leigh? Instinctively, I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. He smiled at me as if to say I'm all right, but I couldn't keep my heart from pounding out its ominous warnings. Like some old seafaring soul, I sensed an impending storm over the horizon and felt the need to batten down the hatches. From the moment we left Boston Harbor, Mama complained continually about the devastating effect the salty sea air was having on her skin and hair. Daddy and I spent many evenings without her, watching a movie or attending one of the shows. She would promise to join us, but never appear. When I inquired, she told me she was too tired or had a headache. I would find her in her bed reading one of her many magazines or scribbling letters. Whenever I asked her to whom she was writing, she would simply reply, "Just friends," and put everything away as if she had become instantaneously bored with what she had been doing. Even when I sat on her bed and described the singers and the comedians and the activities, she seemed very distracted, not very interested, so I knew she wasn't very happy. And then, one night, nearly a week after our cruise had begun, I was woken by the sound of Mama and Daddy shouting at each other. "I do everything you asked of me," Daddy complained, "but you still act as if you're suffering. You're the owner's wife, but do you attend to some of our more important guests? No. I told you how the sea air affects me, but you don't care about me. You care only about your precious ship and your business. You would sacrifice me to it, endanger my beauty, my looks and health, just to use me as some sort of public relations person." The next evening, things became even worse when Mama developed a bad case of seasickness. The ship's doctor was called twice. He gave her double doses of everything, but she wasn't much better the next day and wouldn't get out of bed. She didn't come out of her suite until we sailed into Montego Bay and Daddy went down to announce we had arrived. It was a magnificent day, the kind the Caribbean islands were famous for. Rich, blue sky with only a passing cloud, a luscious warm breeze, and music everywhere. I was on the upper deck playing ping-pong, so I didn't know what went on between Mama and Daddy below. But the next thing I knew, the porters were carrying Mama's luggage off the ship to a waiting taxi. I watched in disbelief. "Oh, Mama, what are you doing? We weren't supposed to be checking into a hotel here." Daddy signaled to me to come to him. "Your mother wants to see you below," he said. He looked so tired and depressed with his sad, unhappy eyes cast downward at the deck. When I entered her suite, I found Mama looking as healthy as could be. Her cheeks were rosy, her lips bright. It was a miraculous recovery and one that filled me with anxiety and dread. "Oh, Leigh," she said when she set eyes on me. "I've made a decision. I'm going back to Boston. I found a flight going into Miami. From there I will take another flight into Boston." "But Mama, what about our vacation in Jamaica? Why are you doing this?" I cried. "This has turned out to be anything but a vacation for me, Leigh. I'm not enjoying a moment of it, as you know." She straightened the fingers of her gloves. She was obviously determined to walk off the ship in style, knowing many people would be looking at her and wondering what was happening since she was the owner's wife. "Please stay with us, Mama. Please," I begged. "I can't." She turned away. "I'm sorry. I just can't. You'll understand later." "Why? What do you mean?" My heart was in a frantic pitter-patter. Why later? What horrible news awaited? "For now, just let it be, Leigh. Enjoy the rest of this vacation. I'll meet you at the dock when you return." She took my face between her hands and kissed my cheek. "Now, be a good girl." I was crying now. Crying so hard I thought I might not ever stop. "I've left you some of my costume jewelry to wear on your nights out. Be careful with it." We walked out of her suite together. I felt so empty inside. There was something in the way Mama turned at the door to look back at the suite that told me she was saying good riddance. I tried very hard to keep myself occupied during our remaining time in Montego Bay so that I wouldn't keep thinking about Mama's going home, because whenever I did, my heart felt like a brick in my chest. I made friends with two boys who both attended a prep school outside of Boston. Their names were Fulton Whittington Jr. and Raymond Hunt. I spent the entire next day with them. They taught me how to play chess, and we went swimming on the beach. In the cooler later afternoon, we went shopping in the street markets, and I found a beautiful hand-painted silk scarf I knew Mama would love. I bought Daddy an ornamental cane covered with carved fish. Fulton and Raymond wanted to take me on a glass-bottom boat and tour the harbor, but I was anxious to get back to the ship and dress for dinner, because Daddy was taking me to a Jamaican restaurant instead of our eating aboard. I was looking forward to the two of us having a wonderful evening together, talking. I put on some of the costume jewelry Mama had left me, and sat before my mirror brushing my hair just the way she always did, counting out 100 strokes. I put on the lipstick just the way she showed me, and sprayed myself with jasmine perfume. So that I would look older and more sophisticated, I unbuttoned the first 2 buttons of my bright blue silk blouse. I felt that I looked sensational, and I hoped that Daddy would think so too. He was waiting for me on the deck. Suddenly I felt all quivery over how I would look to him, but he took one glance at me and smiled widely, his eyes brightening just the way they often did when Mama appeared all dressed up to go to a gala or to a fancy restaurant. "You look gorgeous, Princess." He turned to his right. "We have the prettiest date in Jamaica tonight," he declared to Captain Wilshaw. I had been so anxious about how I looked to Daddy when he first saw me that I hadn't even noticed the captain standing on the sidelines. I couldn't help my look of disappointment when he added, "The captain has agreed to join us for dinner, Leigh. Isn't that nice?" "Join us for dinner?" "Oh, yes." "But Daddy," I thought, "what happened to our private date? Don't you understand what is in my heart of hearts? Couldn't you see that I needed you and you alone with me tonight?" I got through the evening somehow, but when I returned to my suite and crawled under the covers, I sobbed like a baby in the darkness until I cried myself asleep. The journey home seemed so much longer because I was so anxious to get there to see Mama and to see Mama greet Daddy. I got down on my knees every night and prayed that she would be less angry with him. On the morning we would dock in Boston, I heard a knock on my door. It was Daddy. He was dressed in his dark suit, but he didn't look as handsome as he usually did. He looked like he had been up all night and had gotten dressed in the dark. "Good morning, Princess," he said softly. "I waited until the last possible moment to come here to tell you this. I wanted to hold off as long as I could, to hold sadness away for as long as I could." "Sadness?" I brought my hands to the base of my throat and sat so still, unable to breathe, waiting for him to say more. I heard the pounding of my heart and felt the slight rocking of the ocean liner in the water. "A few days ago, Leigh, I received a telegram on board ship. It was from your mother, and she informed me she flew from Miami to Mexico instead of from Miami to Boston and processed a divorce." He said this quickly, like a doctor giving a patient bad news, so as not to draw out something so painful. But his words hung in the air as if they had been frozen there. My heart fluttered beneath my breast and then became a thumping drum. Divorce. It was such a forbidden word. I had read about the divorces of movie stars, but I had no friends whose parents were divorced, and the students in school whose parents were divorced were somehow thought of as different, sometimes avoided as if they had leprosy. But Daddy, what will become of us? I was frantic now. What I really meant was, what will become of me? He understood. "You will stay with your mother. The two of you will live in our house for as long as your mother wants to. After a very short leave, I'm taking another cruise, an exploratory one to a place called the Canary Islands. I guess your mother is right about one thing, Leigh. I am devoted to my business. I can't sit by and just let it die," he confessed. "I want to go with you, Daddy," I choked out through my sobs. Now, sweetheart. That would be impossible and wrong. You have your school and your friends, and you should be with your mother in your own home where you will be comfortable." "Daddy, won't I ever see you again?" I pleaded. "Oh, sure you will. This trip will only be about a month, and then I'll come by, and I'll call and write you whenever I can." "Oh, Daddy, I don't want you to go. I don't want you to just come by," I choked. The tears were streaming freely down my face now. No matter how I tried, I couldn't hold back the sobs. Finally, Daddy embraced me and held me tighter than he had ever held me, and he kissed my hair and stroked me. There, my darling princess, it will be all right." He held me and wiped away my tears. "You're the owner's daughter. You want to put on a good face and go upstairs to say goodbye to people alongside me. Will you do that for me?" "Of course I will, Daddy." I got up slowly, I would do what he asked of me. As we drew closer and closer to the dock, I could see the crowd of people that had gathered to greet the returning voyagers. I looked for Mama, but I didn't see her anywhere. Finally, I saw one of our cars, but there was just Paul Roberts, a driver we used frequently, standing beside the car, waiting. Daddy said I should go home with Paul, that he had some work to do and would stop by to see me later. When we got to our house, Clarence, our butler, told me Mama had gone for a ride to the seashore that morning and had not yet returned. I went upstairs to my room. I felt like someone who had been hypnotized. Mechanically, I unpacked. Then I sat on my bed like one in a daze. Finally, out of curiosity and boredom, I got up and went into Mama's suite. She had still not returned. Something on her desk caught my eye. It looked like a pile of books containing samples from a printing company. I opened the first book of samples. At first, it made no sense at all. I continued to thumb through the books. They were all the same. They were all samples of wedding invitations. Mama didn't come home for hours. I waited and waited until I heard her entering the house. I stepped out of my room just as she reached the top of the stairway. She looked just as beautiful as ever. If anything, her beauty had flourished since she had left Daddy and me. "Why didn't you come down to the dock? Where were you?" I asked. "Where was I? I was at Farthie," she sang, and started for her suite. She turned back to flash a quick smile. "I didn't think you'd mind, and it was so nice out at the seashore today," she said as she took off her hat and coat. I followed her into her suite. She fell back over her bed and flung her arms to her sides as she bounced on the mattress. I had never seen her so cheerful. "Daddy told me about your telegram," I blurted. "Why did you do it? How can you do it?" I screamed, enraged at my mother. I hated how little she seemed to care about how I was affected by her selfish decision. "Leigh, I was hoping you would be adult about all this now," she said calmly, but firmly, sitting up. "I have been wanting to do this for some time, but I held off until I thought you were old enough to deal with it on a mature level. I've tried to keep my sanity just so you would grow up in a happy home, but I can't sacrifice anymore. I won't. I won't give up what is so precious and fleeting, my youth and my beauty. I won't wilt away like some flower closed off from the sun. I belong out there on the dance floors, at the operas and the theater, at the seashore resorts, at the parties with my picture being taken for the society pages. Do you have any idea how many affairs I had to miss because your father was too busy to attend? Do you?" Her face was scarlet and her eyes were screwed so tight that I was frightened. "But you were so in love. You told me so yourself." "I was young. I didn't know what love was then." She smiled. "But now I understand. Completely," she added, the brightness and sparkle returning to her face. "Oh, Leigh, Leigh," she cried, "don't hate me, but I'm in love, really and truly in love. You might as well know it all. I'm in love with Tony Tatterton, and he is madly in love with me, and we're going to have a Christmas wedding and live at Farthie." Even though I had anticipated something like this, actually hearing her say these words was devastating. I felt my face whiten and drain. A combination of shock and sorrow numbed my legs and nailed my feet to the floor. "Will you try to understand, Leigh? I appreciate what you're going through, but I'm going to need you to help me too. I need your support and love. Will you be more than my daughter? Will you be my best friend too?" Her eyes were glassy, tear-filled, but warm. I couldn't help reaching out to her. She kissed my cheek. "I'll try," I said. "And Leigh, most important of all, will you try to like Tony? Will you give him a chance?" I nodded. "And there is one other thing I have to ask of you, Leigh. One thing. A secret to be kept between two best friends." She leaned toward me and whispered as if there were other people in the room. "Tony doesn't know my true age, even now, even though he has proposed and I have accepted. I don't want him to know. As I told you after we left Farthie, he believes I'm 28. Won't you ever tell him the truth?" "Someday, but not right now, okay?" I nodded, but wondered if they were so much in love, why was it necessary to lie? She got up. I'm going to take a warm bubble bath now, because I can relax now that I know my little girl is understanding and loves me. I bought you something in the street market, Mama. Let me get it, I cried, and rushed back to my room. It's not very much, I told her when I returned, but I thought it was beautiful. She unwrapped it quickly and looked down at the hand-painted scarf. Oh, this is great, Leigh. How clever of you to pick it out. It will go with so many of my outfits. She went into her bathroom to run her water. I stood there for a moment, listening to her hum to herself, and then left. Daddy arrived shortly before dinner. I heard the front door open and heard Clarence say, "Hello, Mr. VanVoreen." Daddy, I thought, and jumped up. He was already in his office gathering some papers. "Hello, Leigh. All settled back, are you?" I felt so sorry for him. He looked tired and worn, older than ever. And I kept thinking how much worse it would be for him once he learned about Mama's love for Tony Tatterton. "Are you staying here for a while?" I asked. "No, Leigh. I've got to get back to the office and prepare for my next journey." I sat on the leather settee watching him, and I felt terrible. Daddy saw the troubled look on my face. Now, he said. "You must not do this to yourself. Once we're through the storm, it will be clear sailing again." He started around his desk and then stopped abruptly, the expression on his face changing quickly from a soft, loving one to a look of firmness, even anger. I spun around. Mama was standing in the doorway. "Hello, Cleve," she said. "There are some matters to discuss. Leigh, would you excuse us for a while, please?" I got up and rushed out of the office. I turned back to see Mama close the door. I went up to my room. It seemed like hours, but finally Mama came in to get me. "Is Daddy going to eat with us?" I asked hopefully. "No, it's just like old times," she said dryly. "He's off to his shipyards." "Off? Did he leave?" I cried. "Oh, surely he didn't leave without saying goodbye, without giving me a last kiss." "Yes, he's gone. Let's go to dinner." She turned away. I rushed to my window to look out in hopes of catching sight of Daddy leaving the house. But the street below was empty, the street lights casting long, dark, and lonely shadows over the sidewalks. I clenched my hands into fists, and then I looked about my room. I looked at all the things I had that reminded me of Daddy. Looked at his picture, looked at the models of ships. It was over. This life I had known had passed on into that empty night below. One day slipped into another. I returned to school and described my Jamaican trip to all my girlfriends. Toward the end of the first week, Daddy called to tell me about his plans for his next voyage. He said he would try to write or call as soon as he reached the Canary Islands. Oh, how I missed him, and how I tried not to hate Mama for driving him out of my life. Mama began to announce her plans for her and Tony's wedding. "It will be like a royal coronation," she said, and followed it with a trail of laughter. "The invitation will become a collector's item, for I am designing it myself. We are going to have a 26-piece orchestra and flowers flown in from South America, and Tony has come up with a wonderful added touch. A commemorative Tatterton toy created for each and every guest with the date of our wedding carved into it." Mama had planned every moment, every little detail, as if it really was going to be the most important social event of the decade. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I was on my way back to Farthie for a wedding ceremony rehearsal. It had snowed very heavily up and down the New England coast 2 days before. The landscape we passed through on our way to Farthie was covered with a white blanket that sparkled and looked crisp and clean in the morning sunlight. When the limo pulled up to the front steps of Farthingale Manor, little Troy was outside with Mrs. Hastings, his nanny. "Leigh!" he cried the moment I stepped out. "Look at my snowman!" "That's the best snowman I have ever seen," I told him, holding out my hand. He took it quickly, and we followed Mama into the house. Tony emerged from his office as soon as our arrival had been announced. He wore his tuxedo pants and white shirt without a tie, his sleeves still open and without cufflinks. For some reason, this way he reminded me even more of a movie star. He looked so tall and dashing. "Darling." Tony took Mama's hands and kissed her quickly on the lips. He smiled, his eyes looking mischievous. "Hi, Leigh. I bet you're not as nervous as I am." "Of course I am," I said sharply. "Well," Tony said, slapping his hands together, "now is as good a time as any for me to show Leigh her suite of rooms. Right this way," he commanded, and we ascended the stairway. Tony led me down left on the second floor and stopped before a set of double doors. He threw them open dramatically. There before me was the loveliest, most darling double bed with 4 posters and an arching canopy of heavy lace. I wandered on into the dressing room and bathroom area. There were mirrors and lights everywhere, it seemed, and there were crystal chandeliers and hidden lights that lit up all the walk-in closets, one closet almost as big as my entire Boston bedroom. I sensed Tony right behind me and turned. He was standing so close I felt his breath on my forehead and inhaled his aftershave lotion. "I hope you can be happy here, Leigh. It's almost as important to me as making your mother happy," he said softly. I wanted to scream back at him. I wanted to demand to know how he expected me to be happy. I think he read the rage that lingered just below the surface, for he backed away. "I know it's not easy for you right now, but I'm going to try to make things work between us. It will take a while, I know, but in time I hope you will consider me more than just a stepfather. I want to be your friend, too." Before I could reply, he turned and walked out. Throughout the entire rehearsal, I felt as if I were moving through a dream. I couldn't help looking around every once in a while, searching for Daddy, half expecting him to come charging through the great front doors to take Mama and me out of this castle and on our way home, safe and sound forever and ever. There was an hour before lunch, so Troy led me outside to help him with his snowman. "We gotta go get some pieces of hedge to make the snowman's clothes. Boris trims the maze all the time and there's pieces of hedge there. We gotta get some, okay?" He grabbed my mittened hand into his and started us away from the house. A walk would do us both good, I thought. It was cold just standing around, and the snowflakes were falling faster and getting bigger every moment. We stopped at the entrance to the maze. "I don't see any hedge trimmings, Troy. Let's go back." "No, there's always some. We'll go in a little and look, okay?" he pleaded. "All right," I said. "We can't get lost anyway because we can just follow our footsteps in the snow back." He charged ahead of me into the maze. I hesitated a moment and then followed. Actually, I welcomed the serenity of the maze. As we went deeper and deeper into the belly of it, the world beyond fell farther and farther away. I lost track of how many sharp right angles we took. One corridor looked the same as another, especially dressed in the newly forming coats of snow. The maze was indeed deep and seemingly endless. "Troy," I finally called, "we'd better turn back. There are no hedge trimmings and we're just wandering about in circles, I think." "No, we're not. We're going to the cottage. Just a little more, please. Please, Leigh." He ran ahead, disappearing around a turn. I quickened my pace, made a turn, and found myself out of the maze. And there it was. Just as Troy had said. A little house that looked like something Mama might have drawn in one of her children's book illustrations. Surrounded by tall pines was a small stone cottage with a red slate roof. There was a path of pale flagstone leading to the front door. "Come on, Leigh," Troy called, and hurried down the path to the front door. "Wait," I cried, but he had already turned the doorknob and entered. I followed and found him sitting in a hard maple rocking chair next to the fireplace. He wore this big smile of self-satisfaction. I looked around the small room and imagined it would be very cozy when the fireplace was burning. There were just some simple pieces of furniture, an old couch, an easy chair, a rectangular brown rug, some small tables, and empty dark pine wooden shelves. The thin white cotton curtains hung sadly over the frosted windows. It was so cold in the cottage that I could see both mine and Troy's breath. "No one lives here now?" I asked, as I wandered through to look at the one small bedroom and the small kitchen. There was a single bed in the bedroom, and a small dresser, but no rug on the floor and no mirrors. The kitchen had an old coal stove, a small sink, and instead of a refrigerator, an icebox, the doors of which were wide open. Nothing was in it, however. Troy jumped off the rocker to follow me. "Boris lives here in the summer sometimes, but it's really my secret place," Troy said. "Will we come here again? Will we, Leigh?" "I suppose," I said. Maybe it would become my secret place too, I thought, especially when things became too difficult for me back at the mansion. "I can bring in some logs from the pile outside," Troy said, "and we can make a fire in the fireplace." No, I think we had better just head back." But he was already out the front door. I shook my head and laughed at his enthusiasm. Maybe warming up with a small fire would be all right. Troy came rushing back in with an armload of kindling wood. He brushed the snow off it, placed it in the fireplace, and carefully arranged the sticks. Then he pushed open the vent and lit some small twigs under some large ones. Soon he had quite a little fire going. He ran out and brought in 2 good-sized logs and placed them carefully on the fire. "Very good, Troy." I was amazed. "You're very grown up." "I'm like the daddy here," he said proudly. "You can be like the mommy and make us supper and clean." I laughed and thought how I wish I could create a happy family in this small cottage. I would give up all the big rooms and glamorous things. What else should I do? What else does a daddy do? Poor Troy, I thought. He never really had a chance to know his father and know how important a daddy was. I pulled the rocker up close to our small fire. Troy came to me and I sat him in my lap. "A daddy makes you feel safe and secure," I said. "And does Daddy love Mommy and Mommy love Daddy?" "Oh yes, very much. For them there are no people who are more important in the whole world. Because love brings them together, you see. And love is... I couldn't go on and I found myself sobbing, shoulders shaking. "Leigh, why are you crying?" "I cry sometimes when I think about my daddy." "Why? Because he's not here?" "Uh-huh. I'll be your daddy when he's not here, okay?" "Oh, Troy." I hugged him to me. "You're very precious and sweet, but I'm afraid you can't because..." "Oh, no." "What?" "Look at how hard it's snowing," I said, pointing to the window. It was almost impossible to see the pine trees through the shower of heavy flakes. "We better get going." I lifted him to the floor. "Come, quickly." I took his hand and we left the cottage. It seemed like nearly an inch of snow had fallen over the flagstone already. I hurried him down the path into the maze, rushing into it, the snow blinding me with its fury. "Oh no," I said, looking at the fork in the path ahead of us, one corridor going to the left, the other to the right. "Our footsteps, they're gone. The new snow has covered them already, and I can't remember if we came from the right side or the left side here." "It's all right," Troy said bravely. "We'll find our way." He started down the corridor and turned back. "Come on," he beckoned. Reluctantly, I plodded forward, took Troy's hand and made my first guess. Then I made another, and another, and another. The snow never slowed for a moment, and soon all the turns and all the corridors looked alike. When I made another turn and came upon our freshly made footsteps, I realized we had just gone around in a circle. "We're lost," I cried. Troy began to sob. "Don't cry, Troy. Someone will help us. We'll get out soon." I lifted him and started down another corridor, the flakes of snow sticking to my cheeks and forehead. My feet were very cold. I wasn't prepared for a trek through deep snow. Little Troy clung to me and I clung to him, and like 2 orphans cast out in an unforgiving storm, we searched for a sign of home. I heard the shouts, and shouted back at the top of my voice. I recognized Tony's voice, and then I heard him scream some commands. Suddenly, a stout elderly man appeared through the snow showers in front of us, and little Troy exclaimed, "Boris!" The kindly and concerned gardener hurried to us. "Here, let me take Master Tatterton," he offered, and Troy went eagerly into his arms. "Just follow me, miss. Stay close behind," Boris advised. He didn't have to tell me twice. I practically clung to the back of his coat as he led us on and out of the maze. Tony and Miles were waiting at the entrance. "Why did you go into the maze?" Tony demanded quickly. Instead of responding, I started to cry. His face softened instantly. "Are you all right?" "I'm freezing," I said. My legs felt numb and my toes ached. I felt a strange combination of heat and cold in my cheeks, and that frightened me. "Let's get them inside," Tony snapped. Mama came out of the music room the moment Curtis opened the front doors. She looked distraught and confused. "They got lost in the maze," Tony explained quickly. "Jillian, you should get her into a warm bath." "But Tony warned you about going into the maze," Mama said, her voice growing shrill. "This wasn't the time for such things. All these people here for the rehearsal. We were getting frantic looking for you. How embarrassing." "Jillian, get her into a warm bath and into a change of clothing." "I can't believe you did this to me, Leigh. I can't believe it." Tony seized my left arm at the elbow and took me up to my room. A moment later, he was running my bath water. My fingers trembled as I peeled off my soaked mittens. I started to pull my sweater up and over my head, but my arms were shaking so I couldn't manipulate well. Just as I had it over my face, I felt Tony seize it and help pull it off. "Sit on the bed," Tony commanded. After I did, he squatted before me and pulled off my shoes and took off my stockings. "You'll have to get into that water or you'll catch pneumonia." He got up and went back to check the bath. I slipped my damp skirt down and stepped gingerly out of it. My slip felt cold and damp, too. My arms ached and it was still hard to control my fingers, but I got my slip off and sat back on the bed. Where was Mama? Why didn't she come to help me already? Why was she leaving this to Tony? Was this her way of punishing me? "It's ready," Tony announced in the bathroom doorway. I brought my fingers to my blouse, but the buttons felt so big and so secure, and the tips of my fingers itched madly. I fumbled helplessly. "Let me help you," Tony offered. "No, I know, it's embarrassing, but I'll just get you started and then you can do the rest." I gazed into his warm blue eyes and handsome face. He undid the top button of my blouse, and then the next, and the next, working gracefully but quickly. When the blouse was completely undone, he paused and looked into my eyes. My whole body was still trembling, but not only from the cold. He smiled softly and took my right hand into his and then rubbed it quickly. "You'll be all right," he said, "once you're soaking in the bath water." He brought his fingers to the collar of my blouse and gently pulled it back over my shoulders and down my arms. In a moment, I was only in my bra and panties. "Go on," he whispered, his breath hot on the back of my neck. Without looking back, I walked to the bathroom. After I closed the door, I got out of my bra and panties and lowered myself into the warm, blue-tinted water. I felt a wonderful flush of heat drive away the chill. I moaned with delight and closed my eyes. I heard a knock on the door. Mama had finally come up, I thought. The door opened, but it wasn't Mama. It was Tony. "You forgot your robe," he said, and opened the door wider. I lowered my body as far as I could into the water. The soap foam hid some of my nakedness, but I still felt so exposed and terribly flustered when he entered to place the robe on a hook. "Don't feel bad. Troy will be all right," he said, as though he thought that were the reason for my look of discomfort. He knelt beside the tub. "Water still warm enough?" He put his fingers into it, only inches from my thigh. "Yes," I said quickly. I folded my arms over my breasts. "You're not embarrassed, are you? We're family now," he added. "We'll be as intimate and close to each other as possible, just as if we've been living together our whole lives. You'll see." He leaned forward to kiss my forehead tenderly, cupping my face between his palms. He kept his face close to mine and stared into my eyes, his luminous and deep. "Okay," he finally said, standing up and wiping his hands on a towel. "I'll see about your mother and Troy." During the ride back to Boston the next morning, Mama finally elaborated on her honeymoon plans. She and Tony were flying to St. Moritz to stay at the Palace Hotel. They would leave right after the ceremony. "Unfortunately, we'll be away for Christmas and New Year's," she said. "But you will have everything at your disposal at Farley and mountains of gifts. If you want Miles to take you someplace, he will. We'll make it up to you when we return. You know, of course, that Tony's working behind the scenes to get you right into the best private girls' school around. It's called Winter Haven. Isn't that a wonderful name for a private school? It just rings of class and richness, doesn't it? It's a sleepover," she added quickly. "A sleepover? You mean I'll live there, like at a college?" "Miles will drive you there every Sunday night, and you can return every Friday if you like. Doesn't that sound wonderful? Think of all the new friends you will make, and all the girls from well-known rich families. And you will meet fine young men, too. They have dances and get-togethers with a nearby all-boys finishing school. You will finally be around people of your class, Leigh." "Finally," she added with a breath. I sat back, stunned. All these changes being rushed over me. My life was truly topsy-turvy. My Grandma Jana arrived from Texas for Mama's wedding. I heard her shouting at the cab driver who struggled with her luggage, scraping a bag against our front door as they came in. Clarence came rushing to the poor man's aid. It was hard to believe that an elderly woman hardly 5 feet tall, a thin wisp of a woman, could make grown men jump and stutter so, but her voice snapped like a bullwhip when she was angry, and her small, sharp eyes flashed. She had her silvery gold hair pinned back so tightly in a bun that the skin at the corners of her eyes and the top of her forehead looked strained, something which only added to her fierce and fiery demeanor. Grandma Jana gave me a real hug and kiss and held me back. "Goodness, look at you. You've grown nearly a foot, and in other ways, too, I see." "I haven't grown that much, Grandma," I said, smiling. She grunted and spun around to Mama. "Before I settle in, I want to hear what's going on. Every detail," she commanded. Mama's lips trembled as she forced a smile. Grandma looked about. "I don't imagine Cleve is still in his own house," she added. "No, he's on one of his voyages." "Huh," Grandma said. She went directly to Daddy's office and threw open the door, pointing inside with her cane. "We'll use Cleve's office," she insisted, and walked in. Mama shook her head helplessly and followed Grandma Jana into Daddy's office, closing the door behind her. It snapped open enough for me to hear their voices. I couldn't help my curiosity. I sat on the colonial bench that was just to the left of Daddy's office doorway, pretending I was waiting for them to come out. "Now, what is all this about Cleve not loving you?" Grandma Jana began. "You weren't worried about that when I got him to marry you quickly in Texas. You were damned lucky to find someone so well off who wanted you." "You know I was never happy about this marriage, Mother. You know I never loved Cleve and never could." I couldn't believe my ears. Never loved Daddy? Never could? But the story, the dazzling stars, Cinderella. "Never could," Grandma spit. "I suppose you would have been happier now if I let you marry that worthless Chester Godwin after he'd gotten you pregnant, huh? You could love him, I suppose. The two of you could be in a nice shack in Shantytown and Leigh could be running around in rags. But instead of being grateful that I found you a rich, decent man who would provide you a more than comfortable life, what do? Hate me and finally throw it all away for a man nearly 20 years younger." The words stung my ears. What was Grandma Jana saying? "I didn't expect you would understand anything," Mama said. "How much does this young man know about your past? Does he know the truth? Have you ever told Cleve the truth, or does he still think Leigh's his child?" Grandma demanded. It was as if some giant, invisible pair of hands had grasped me at the waist and squeezed. I bent over in agony, embracing myself. What a horrible, horrible secret to keep from Daddy and me. "Why should they know these things?" Mama said, her voice weakening. "Thought so. Disgusting. Another life built on lies. I have a good mind to turn around and head straight home. But I came, and I'll stay for Leigh's sake. That poor child having to be dragged through one thing after another by her selfish, vain mother. This will come to no good," Grandma Jana predicted in a biblical voice. "Mark my words." I would never tell Daddy, I thought. I would never break his heart, and I didn't care what was true and what was not. In my mind and my heart, he would always be my daddy. And Mama, living the biggest lie of all. Her advice came up in my throat like sour milk. I could still see her face when she said it, wearing the mask of sincerity, of false sincerity. Remember this, Leigh. Nice girls don't go all the way. Not until they're married. Promise you won't forget that. I won't forget it, Mama. I did nothing to let Mama know what I had overheard while sitting outside Daddy's office. But whenever I looked at Mama now, I saw someone different from the woman I had wanted so much to resemble. It was almost as if my real mother had gone away and left this look-alike. This woman who had Mama's hair and Mama's eyes and Mama's beautiful skin, but who was empty inside. Most of our time was spent discussing wedding details anyway. Actually, it was all we ever talked about, till finally Mama's big day arrived. This time, when we passed under the great arch at the front gates of Farthing, I felt the significance of it. The great estate was now my home, I thought, whether I wanted it to be or not. The wedding preparations combined with the Christmas decorations created an overwhelmingly festive atmosphere. There were lights strewn over the hedges, lanterns dangling from evergreen trees, and tinsel and gold splattered everywhere. Inside, the orchestra was practicing in the ballroom. The kitchen staff was setting up the giant tables of food. Ushers were gathering around the minister like football players around their coach getting final instructions. There was a constant traffic of people in the corridors, bridesmaids, escorts, flower girls, and photographers. Relatives stopped by, cousins and aunts and uncles. I never would have believed that a house this big could be so crowded. I didn't think the wedding would have any sense of order, but when the time came, everyone and everything fell into place. Mama looked angelic in her Victorian wedding gown, with a lace neck smothered in pearls. Beautiful and ecstatic, she was just where she had always wanted to be, I thought, at the center of attention. The rings were presented, the final words were said, and the minister pronounced Tony and Mama man and wife. They kissed and the audience cheered. Then Tony and Mama made their way back through the appreciative crowd of guests, and the reception began. I was going to join Grandma Janet to have my piece of the sky-high wedding cake when Mama suddenly took hold of my arm. "Come with me," she said, quickly. "I want to show you something." She took my hand and led me out of the ballroom, upstairs to her suite. She went to her wall safe. "I had Tony install this for my jewels," she explained. "And," she added, turning back to me, a wry smile on her face, "my documents." "Documents?" She just continued to smile impishly and opened her safe. Then she reached in and produced a very important-looking file. Inside were 3 pages of long paper clipped together. She handed it to me and I read the title, A Prenuptial Agreement. "What is this?" I asked. "It's a contract between Tony and me," she said proudly. "I had my attorney prepare it. If we should divorce for any reason, I get half of what he is worth." "Half," she repeated. "Half of all this," she said, extending her arms. "I don't understand, Mama. Why do you need this?" "Insurance," she said, taking the papers back, obviously not pleased with my confusion. "There is no man in the world I would trust. Absolutely none. I thought I had taught you that." I didn't know what to say. I had thought love meant trust. Were you really in love if you had to have lawyers and judges looking over your shoulders? Troy and I opened our presents together on Christmas morning. There were at least a dozen different brightly wrapped boxes with my name on them, some from Mama, some from Tony. But a small box caught my eye first, because I saw the emblem of Daddy's ocean liner company on the card's envelope. Gingerly, taking great care not to tear the paper, I unwrapped the present to find a small dark blue velvet box. I opened it and took out a heavy gold locket in the shape of a heart with a sparkling gold chain. I pressed the release button, and the locket opened to a tiny picture of Daddy and me standing on the Jillian. We both looked tanned and happy. I remember why I looked so happy. We were on the way home, and I thought I would find Mama waiting for me at the dock. "Now look at my present to you," Troy said. "I made it myself and wrapped it myself." I opened the small package and couldn't believe my eyes. It was a ceramic little horse with a girl rider. The girl could be taken off. "That's Sniffles," Troy explained, "my horse. And that's you riding it." "It's beautiful, Troy. It's one of the best Christmas presents I have ever received. Thank you." I kissed him on the cheek. His eyes twinkled, and then he went back to unwrapping his presents. Troy awoke with a bad cold on New Year's Day, the day Mama and Tony were returning from their honeymoon. By 8 o'clock in the morning, he was running a high fever, and Mrs. Hastings had to send for the doctor. The doctor thought he was developing pneumonia, and an ambulance came and took little Troy to the hospital. He was delirious with fever and didn't even recognize me by the time they carried him away. He kept calling for Tony. Mama finally arrived at Farthing, but Tony wasn't with her. They had dropped him off directly at the hospital. She hugged me and whispered, "You wouldn't think a honeymoon could be exhausting, Leigh. But believe me, this one was. I'm absolutely drained, sapped of every ounce of energy. I can't wait to get into my soft bed and close my eyes." "Did you see Troy?" I asked. "Certainly not," she said, shaking her head. "You don't expose yourself to those things if you don't have to." How could she be so uncaring and worry only about herself at a time like this? Was she always this selfish, I asked myself? And why was her honeymoon so exhausting? Wasn't it supposed to be the most wonderful time of your life? Mama shut herself in her room. When Mrs. Hastings told me that Troy's fever had gone even higher, I demanded Miles take me to the hospital. When I got there, I went straight to Troy's room. Tony was emerging with the doctor. "His fever has broken," he announced happily, "and he's having much less difficulty breathing. He's going to be all right." I was so relieved, I started to cry. Tony and the doctor looked at each other and laughed, and then Tony embraced me. "Thank you, Leigh," he whispered, "for caring about him so much." The next day, Mama couldn't wait to tell me all about the honeymoon. "Oh, Leigh, you just can't imagine how difficult it has been. He makes love like it's going to be for the last time. And once it's over, and you expect to have a chance to catch your breath, he's at it again, even in the middle of the night. He was angry because I didn't respond the way he hoped I would. Well, I couldn't. I wouldn't. I'm not going to sacrifice my health and beauty to satisfy a young man's animal appetite." I didn't know what to say. Mama made it sound as if lovemaking was an ordeal, but that wasn't the way it was described in books I had read. "Oh, Leigh, you've got to be my best friend, my ally more than ever now. Will you? Will you help me?" "Of course I will," I replied, even though I had no idea what she meant. "You'll spend time with him too, and keep him distracted. When you start school next week, you'll come home on weekends as often as you can. A young girl has so much more energy. Maybe you'll be able to tire him out so he won't come at me like some kind of Casanova at night." On the day we set out for Boston and my new school, Mama stayed at Farthing, saying she was still too tired from her honeymoon to go with me. I knew why she really didn't want to come along. She didn't want the world to know she had a daughter as old as I was. She was so determined I would be like a sister to her that in her mind I was her sister now, not her daughter. So Tony drove me to Winter Haven. The school had an elegant and special look to it. It was nestled snugly in its own small campus of bare winter trees, with evergreens relieving the bleakness. I met the headmistress, Miss Mallory, a stout, affable woman, who took me to my room and introduced me to my roommate, Jennifer Longstone. Jennifer was at least 3 inches shorter than me, with a round face, big dark eyes, and what I thought was beautiful black hair as black as licorice. I liked her smile and the way her pug nose twitched. Jennifer was from Hyannis, and this was her 3rd year at Winter Haven. She gave me the tour, showing me the assembly hall, the gymnasium, and the cafeteria. The food was a lot better than what I was used to at my old school. At least one thing reflected the cost, I thought. Jennifer and I ate at a table with 6 other girls. Jennifer introduced me to them. They all came from wealthy, upper-class families, families concerned with their lineage. "You're lucky," one of them said. Her name was Marie Johnson. "You're sitting with the best group of girls in the junior high wing. We have our own special club. We stick together. I'm having a party in my room tonight after curfew. You can come." A few of the girls had seen me arrive with Tony and had spread the word that he was so good-looking. They wanted to know who he was. I explained that he was my stepfather and the head of Tatterson Toys. When Marie asked me if my real father was dead, I blurted out, "My mother divorced my father." I didn't see the point of hiding it. After dinner, we were all supposed to begin our study hour. As the girls rose to leave, Marie leaned over to me. "I'm canceling my party tonight," she said. "I forgot I have a science test tomorrow." I just nodded and watched her join the others. "She's not canceling her party," I told Jennifer. "They don't want to associate with me because my parents are divorced." I suddenly wanted to be back home in Boston more than ever, and going to my old school, where my real friends would feel sorry for me instead of think me a leper. Jennifer was very sweet and made every effort to cheer me up, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I turned to Jennifer and said, "If I am going to attend this school, I am going to be accepted for who and what I am, and none of these snooty girls is going to make me suffer." I made Jennifer show me Marie's room. We could hear the music rock around the clock. I pounded on the door. The phonograph was lowered and there was some whispering. Then Marie opened the door. "I'm sorry for how you all feel about my parents getting a divorce, but it's stupid for you to blame it on me. I'm sure no one here is perfect," I stated with fire. "Anyway, I just wanted you all to know you didn't fool anyone. Come on, Jennifer." "Wait," Marie said. She glanced quickly at the other girls. "You're right. It wasn't a nice thing to do." I looked at the other girls. All of them lowered their eyes. "Anyway, you're here. You might as well stay," Marie said, flashing a smile. We stayed in Marie's room until nearly 11, talking about school and about music and movies. Then Jennifer and I lay on our beds talking until after 12. I closed my eyes, exhausted from the turmoil and the effort it took to be happy and safe in a world that could be so mean and cold. Daddy called on Wednesday and arrived on Thursday to take me to an elegant restaurant for dinner. I talked and talked during our meal, hardly tasting the food, so excited that he was really here and I was really with him. But an alarm went off in my heart because I sensed that he had something to tell me that would make me unhappy. "I won't be able to see you for a while," he said. "I won't be back until the summer at the soonest. I'm going to Europe to open an office, but as soon as I do return, we'll spend as much time together as you want, I promise." How could I stand it if Daddy, my rock, was gone for so long? With Mama becoming so very self-centered and unreliable, to whom could I go for advice, for love, for the warmth of hugs and kisses? On Friday night, Tony picked me up and took me back to Farthing. When I entered the big house, I was immediately impressed with the silence, especially without little Troy scampering up and down stairs and through doors. He was still in the hospital and would be released next week. Farthing seemed like a museum to me, a house of whispers, after being in a world of energy, noise, and young life at Winter Haven. My first weekend home from Winter Haven began the way most of these weekends would. Our Friday night dinners were always quite formal, and Tony and Mama usually had friends to join us. None of the other couples ever brought their children along, so, except for me and Troy, when he was well enough to join us at the table, I was always with the adults, who talked about things that I had little interest in. Sometimes Tony had a movie to show in the little theater. A few times we had a pianist perform in the music room. Tony and I did go to a nearby ski hill on Saturdays throughout the winter months. Mama never came along with us. She would go somewhere to play bridge or have her women friends over to play at Farthie. If she didn't play bridge, she would go shopping or to matinees in Boston. During the spring months, Tony and I started horseback riding. He decided to teach me himself. We would go for rides along the beach and over the dunes. That winter and spring, Mama was the happiest. I was doing what she wanted, spending most of the weekends with Tony and freeing her to indulge in her own activities. Daddy's postcards and letters came regularly throughout the winter months and into the spring. Around May, one of his letters mentioned someone new, mentioned her as if I had always known her. And today, he began in his middle paragraph, Mildred Pierce and I had lunch at the Champs-Élysées. We went to museums, and I even let her talk me into going to the top of the Eiffel Tower. Mildred is great company. Who was Mildred Pierce? And then it came in early June. Daddy wrote to tell me he would be returning in mid-July. He said he was anxious for me to meet Mildred Pierce. Being with her is like being able to push away the gray clouds and bring sunshine back into my life, he wrote. But Daddy, I cried inside, I thought I was the one who brought sunshine into your life. Has someone stolen that part of your heart I thought had been left for me? The school year ended, and all of us in the special club said our goodbyes, promising to write each other as much as possible. I felt terrible about never having invited anyone to Farthie, not even Jennifer. But whenever I had brought it up, Mama would go into a panic, sometimes even a rage. It was always too soon. Wait. Troy had a full-time nurse now, and the doctor had put him on a schedule of sunshine now that summer was in full swing. I would sit by the pool with him practically all day until the sun started to drop behind the trees and cooler long shadows crept up over the patio to cover the lounge chairs. One evening, we were just heading inside when Mama and Tony called me into the living room. Tony has a wonderful new idea, Mama proclaimed, and he wants you to be a part of it. No one is more enamored and entranced with themselves than wealthy people are, Tony began. They will go to any length, spend any amount of money to have their portraits painted by the best artists, their photographs taken by the best photographers. So imagine a doll that has your face on it and is your doll. Everyone will want one. Mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, even men will come to want male dolls made in their images eventually. And Tatterton Toys will be the first in America to offer these portrait dolls. It's brilliant, he exclaimed. And Tony wants you to be the model for the very first doll, and he wants to do the doll himself, Mama said. Why me? I asked. You already have a doll's face, Tony explained. Why should I go searching for the right look, the right girl, when I have the perfect look and the perfect girl living right under my roof? What do I have to do? I asked. Tony laughed. Just be yourself, nothing more, your entire self. It means you will be a model, Leigh, an artist model. You'll pose. But don't artist models usually pose in the nude? I asked fearfully. Tony laughed, as if I had said the silliest thing. Of course they do, he replied nonchalantly. What of it? It's art, and this doll is going to be a miniature statue. But Mama, pose naked? What of it? You heard him, this is art. Did the man who modeled for Michelangelo's David wear clothes, or the woman who posed to be Venus? It's all going to be done right here at Farthie, she continued, and it will give you something to do this summer. Tony has decided to set up a small studio in the cottage so you and he won't be disturbed. A few nights later, Tony announced at dinner that the cottage had been prepared, and he was ready to begin my posing sessions after breakfast the following morning. I felt heat rush to my cheeks and my heart flutter. It was a beautiful warm morning with a turquoise sky when Tony and I set out through the maze and arrived at the cottage. All the shades had been drawn. Tony had set up his easel and paints, pencils and pens. I was wearing a plain white, short-sleeved cotton blouse and a light blue skirt. "We'll begin with having you sit there," Tony said, pointing to a small couch. "I'm going to begin with your face. I want this doll to reflect your natural beauty, your soft and lovely expression." I didn't know what to say. Was all that true? He took a long look at me, drinking me in. I fixed my eyes on him and saw the way he measured the features of my face and planned his first lines. I did begin to feel as if I were part of something artistic, and soon lost the trembling and quickened heartbeat. Tony looked at me, drew, looked at me, nodded to himself, and drew. "I want to do an outline of your torso now," he said. "Just stand with your arms at your sides, please," he instructed. I did. "Yes, that's it," he said excitedly. "Yes, yes." He drew lines rapidly. "Now, just unbutton your blouse and bring it down over your shoulders." "Go on," he said when I didn't move. "Just over your shoulders," he repeated in a soft voice. I did it. His eyes widened and he looked at me longer before turning back to the canvas. He drew a little, then shook his head. "I'm not getting your shoulders right. Something—" He approached me and peeled the thin straps of my bra off my shoulders. "Try to relax," he whispered in my ear. His breath felt so hot, it made me think his lips were only inches away. "Do you mind if I do this now?" he asked. I felt his fingers on the clasp of my bra. For a moment I couldn't speak. My heart thumped against my chest. "I want an unobstructed view of your back at this point, okay?" he asked. I just nodded, and then felt the clasp undone, the elastic material snap away. With the shoulder straps already down, my bra fell clear of my breasts. I started to pull it back up, but Tony seized my wrists, roughly at first, and then immediately softening his grasp. He stepped back to the easel. It seemed I was standing this way for hours before he spoke again. "This is coming along fine," he said. "Perfect." He came over and draped a white sheet over my shoulders, pinning it around my neck like a cape. "Take off the rest of your clothing now, but keep this wrapped around you. You'll lower it as we go along, okay? I'll be right back. I want to check on what we have for lunch. It's almost time and I've worked up an appetite." Although I was still quite nervous and embarrassed, I did as he said and waited for him to return. He called me into the kitchen. He had made a platter of finger sandwiches and uncorked a bottle of red wine. During lunch, he asked me if I had a boyfriend at Winter Haven and if I knew what French kissing was. Then he asked me if I had ever seen a boy naked. "Of course not," I snapped. He finished his glass of wine and poured himself another quickly. "Would you always want the lights out whenever you made love with your husband?" he suddenly asked me. I didn't know what to say. "Of course you wouldn't. Why should you?" He looked down and muttered, "She's driving me crazy." I knew he was talking about my mother, but I said nothing. He seemed in a daze. Suddenly he snapped out of it and smiled. "Time to get back to work," he announced, and rose from his seat. I followed him back to the living room that had been turned into a studio, and stood where I had stood before. "Here, let me help you get ready again," he said. He unclipped the sheet at my neck. I held it against my body for a moment. Then he peeled it down over my shoulders, over my arms, peeled it from my bosom, all the time keeping his eyes on my eyes. He smiled and stepped back, gazing at me. My heart pounded. "I love that little birthmark under your breast," he exclaimed. "That's the kind of individualistic little thing I can put into the model to make it definitely you." He rushed back to his easel and resumed sketching. About an hour had passed when he stopped and bit down on his lip hard, shaking his head. "I'm not getting this right," he said. "I'm not doing justice to your symmetry." He stepped forward. "I hope you don't mind, but sometimes we artists see things clearer with our eyes closed. We see through our other senses. An artist who paints beautiful birds must listen to them sing and get their songs into the painting, as well as their colors and shapes. When an artist paints a beautiful green field, he gets the aroma of the grass and flowers into his painting. Understand? I nodded. It did sound right. And through touch, he said, an artist brings depth, texture, fullness to his work. Just relax for a moment, he requested in a breathy whisper. He brought his hands to my waist and closed his eyes. Then his fingers traveled up, over my ribs, pausing as they pressed against my bones. Yes, he said. Yes. He moved his hands farther up, and the tips of his fingers touched the undersides of my breasts. I started to step back. Easy, he said. I'm seeing it all perfectly now. His fingers moved under my bosom and over it, as if he were shaping me in his mind. My legs grew weak and began to tremble. Finally, Tony stepped back, holding his hands off me, but keeping them in the air just at the height of my bosom. He lingered there for a moment, nodded, and returned slowly to the easel, opening his eyes only when he began to sketch. I didn't understand my feelings. I felt embarrassed, frightened, and thrilled at the same time. It was all so confusing. I made up my mind I would talk to my mother about it no matter what. I heard my mother coming up the stairs to her suite. She was laughing and talking quite excitedly to one of our maids. I hurried to my door just as she was going by. "Mama," I cried, following her, "I want to talk to you now." "What's so urgent?" she asked as I came into her bedroom. She sat down at her vanity table and started combing her hair, looking at me in her mirror. "It's about my modeling for the portrait doll," I said. She seemed not to be listening. I waited as she played with some loose strands. Finally, she turned to me. "I can't go on with this, Mama," I said, and started to cry. She jumped up and went to her door to close it quickly. "What is it? You can't do this now, make a scene. You want one of the servants to hear you? And we have dinner guests arriving at any moment. What's wrong?" she exclaimed, her voice frantic. "Oh, Mama, it was hard enough to stand naked in front of Tony while he drew me. But when he touched me..." I quickly explained what Tony had been doing and why he said he was doing it. She listened attentively, her face barely changing expression. "Is that all?" she asked when I finished. She turned back to her mirror. "All? Isn't it enough?" I cried. "But he hasn't done anything to you, has he? You said yourself he tried to make you comfortable. He sounds very considerate to me. Don't be a baby about this, Leigh. It's not going to be that much longer before Tony is finished, and hopefully on to other things that will consume his energies just as much." She got up and went to her jewelry box to choose her rings. She had already put our conversation to sleep. Perhaps my mother did say something to Tony about our discussion, because when we returned to the cottage the next day, he refrained from touching me. In fact, he became more and more intense about his work, at times giving me the feeling he wasn't actually looking at me. He was looking at some image in his mind and simply staring in my direction. One afternoon, I grew bored and actually fell asleep for a few minutes. If he had noticed, he said nothing. By the end of the first week, he had drawn and painted me from all angles. Every night at dinner, the work was the main topic of conversation, even when we had guests. Although I noticed Tony and my mother left out the fact that I was posing in the nude. I didn't complain again to my mother about posing, but I couldn't help wishing it would all soon come to an end. Then at the beginning of the second week, Tony announced he would start the actual sculpturing and create the model for the doll. Then it all started again. When he had touched my body to enhance his ability to draw was nothing compared to what he was doing now. It seemed he stopped every 5 or 10 minutes after he began to work with the clay, so that he could come to me to feel me, or as he said, experience me artistically. Toward the end of our session, he was on his knees, tracing the small of my stomach, running the palms of his hands over my thighs again and again, stroking me as if I were made of clay and he was reshaping me. I wanted to protest, to question, to end it, but I was afraid that whatever I did would only prolong the process, so I kept my eyes closed and endured. Finally, he told me to put on my clothes. After I dressed, I looked at the sculpture. There was a strong resemblance to my face, but the doll's figure was more like my mother's. The day had left me strained, tense, and exhausted. I ran outside, down the green corridors of the maze and around its turns, feeling as if I had just escaped from a madman. By now I had grown adept at moving through the maze. I rushed to the house. As I hurried up the stairway, Mama came out of the music room. "You had a phone call today and you have a date tomorrow. Your father has returned. He wants to have lunch with you in Boston." I was so excited the next morning that I took extra special care in dressing. When I gazed at myself in the mirror, I hoped I would look more grown up to Daddy. It was important, for I wanted to tell him everything that had happened, and especially tell him about my posing for the portrait doll. I had secret hopes that he would ask me to come and live with him now. Miles drove me to the hotel, and I asked the front desk to let Daddy know I was here. The moment he came downstairs, I was going to run into his arms and hold him as tightly as I could. I stood waiting, watching the indicator that told what floor the elevator was presently on. The doors opened, and Daddy stepped out, but I didn't run to him as I had planned. He was holding a woman's hand. She was a thin woman, with gray and black hair cut just below her ears, and she was very tall as my father. Daddy smiled at me, but he didn't release the woman's hand. She smiled too, and they both began walking toward me. I waited, my heart pounding. This had to be the woman he had written about in the letters, the woman he said made him happy, Mildred Pierce. "Leigh," Daddy said, finally holding his arms out to me. I embraced him, but I didn't hold on to him. "Leigh, this is Mildred," Daddy said. "Hello, Leigh. I've heard so much about you. I couldn't wait to meet you," she said, and extended her hand. "Hello," I said. I shook her hand quickly. "Are you hungry?" my father asked. "I have reservations for us here at the hotel. I thought that would be most convenient." We entered the restaurant, and the maitre d' took us to our table. "Let's order," Daddy said. "I'm starving." I didn't care about eating. I didn't care if we never ordered. "We had the London broil yesterday," Mildred said. "If you like that, they do a very good job with it here." "You were here yesterday?" I said quickly, my insides twisting with surprise and disappointment. "Oh," Mildred said. She looked at Daddy. "Yes, Leigh. We've been in town a little over a week, but I didn't want to call you until I could spend time with you. We've had so much to do." I didn't know what to say. How could he have been here so long and not called me? I didn't even try to hide my look of hurt. They looked at each other. "You should tell her all of it," Mildred said, her face tight and serious. I looked at my father. He sat up straight. "2 days ago, Mildred and I got married," he said. "We're off to Maine tomorrow. That's where Mildred's children live. We're just going to surprise them with the news." "Like you surprised me," I said bitterly. Daddy blinked. "We would take you to Maine with us tomorrow," Mildred said, "but I don't want to go with you to Maine," I snapped. "Now, Leigh," Daddy raised his eyebrows. "Why don't we order?" Mildred said. "You should think about the London broil, Leigh." "I hate London broil," I blurted, "and I hate being here, and I hate you." I couldn't help it. It all just rushed out over my tongue, and once the words had escaped, there was no turning back. I got up from the table and ran from the dining room, ran through the hotel lobby and out the front door. Miles was asleep in the front seat of the limousine. I woke him up when I banged on the window. He sat up quickly, shocked by the tears streaming down my face. "Take me back to Farthie," I said, getting in. "I want to go back." Finally, the day came when I was packed off for my return to Winter Haven. That first night back, Jennifer and I sat up in bed talking into the wee hours. I told her about my modeling experience. When I described the way I had first undressed and how Tony slipped the sheet from my body, she grew quiet, her voice then dropping to a bare whisper. "But he's so young-looking," she said. "I don't know if I could have done that. How did you do it?" "I don't know. My mother talked me into it," I told her. I didn't tell her about Tony's method of touching me and then sculpting. I just couldn't confess to that. Jennifer told me she had met a boy over the summer. His name is William Matthews. He's 16, and he attends Allendale, so he'll be at the dance this coming weekend. Are you going to be able to stay? Yes. My mother has agreed to let me stay every other weekend. Oh, that's wonderful, because William's roommate will be coming too, and when I told William about you, he said you and his roommate would be perfect together. His name is Joshua John Bennington. William says he's very shy, but very good-looking, and one of the brightest boys at Allendale. Also, he's very rich. Wearing the proper dress to the dance and looking my best became very important. I finally settled on my pink chiffon with spaghetti straps and a waist bow at the back. By the time Jennifer and I arrived in the dining room, the music had already begun. The band was playing Rock Around the Clock. Colorful streamers and balloons had been hung from the ceiling. All of the boys from Allendale were standing in a herd on one side of the room, some sipping punch, others standing and gazing at us girls with cool eyes and placid smiles, each deciding who he was going to ask to dance. Jennifer introduced me to William. He had a pleasant face with soft, gentle features. I was very happy for her. Standing next to him was a tall, black-haired boy with a very tanned face and bright, hazel-green eyes. I thought he was very handsome, with a quiet, underlying manliness that made my heart flutter. There was a tenderness in his gaze, but the way he glanced at me, with his eyes moving rapidly over me, scooping me in, titillated me. "Leigh," William said, "this is my roommate, Joshua John Bennington. Jen and I are going to dance while you two get acquainted." Joshua and I went to a bench to sit down and talk. I learned that his father was an attorney, that he had 2 brothers and a sister, and that he lived just outside of Boston. His family had a house on Cape Cod, too. He asked me where I lived, and I told him about Farthie. When I mentioned Tony, I said stepfather, but Joshua didn't ask me about my real father or why my mother had remarried. I thought that was very courteous. We danced, ate the refreshments, and danced some more. Jennifer and William were with us most of the time. When the slow dance came, Joshua held me firmly against his body, and his lips grazed my temple. Miss Mallory announced the end of the dance, and the boys began to leave. Jennifer and I walked out with William and Joshua, both of us holding hands with our dates. As soon as we walked out of the building, William pulled Jennifer into the shadows to give her a goodnight kiss. Joshua and I watched, and we turned to each other. I couldn't help my feelings. I wanted him to kiss me too. Without realizing it, I was squeezing his hand. He looked puzzled for a moment, and then he led me toward another shadowy area where he kissed me softly on the lips. Every weekend I remained at Winter Haven. The 4 of us managed to get together to do something, even if it was just to study in the library. We went to movies and to restaurants and took walks on the docks. The weekends I had to go home, Joshua called me twice a day. I told Mama about him, but she didn't seem very interested. Tony was very busy because his business was growing in so many ways. When I asked about the portrait doll, he said it was nearly ready, but he had decided to hold off showing it until the Christmas season, deciding it would be a wonderful new item for their stores. One weekend, early in October, I caught Mama in one of her better moods. I asked her if I could have a birthday party and invite Jennifer, William, and Joshua, as well as a few of the girls. She agreed, and even took charge of the arrangements. My birthday would be on a Monday, but we decided to have the party on the Sunday before. That Saturday night, Tony took my mother and me to dinner for our private celebration. Troy was permitted to go along. We had a wonderful time. Later that night, not more than an hour after we had returned from the restaurant, I heard a knock on my outer door. It was Tony. He stood there, holding a package wrapped in pink and blue paper. I wanted to do this privately, he explained, his blue eyes capturing my own and holding them for a long moment. It's too special for us to share it with anyone at first. Thank you, Tony. I took the package from him and sat down on the settee to unwrap it. I lifted the lid and looked down at my portrait doll. I thought it was truly a work of art. The doll's face so like my own. It was as if I were looking into a mirror that miniaturized whoever gazed upon it. The expression on the doll's face was lovely, an exquisite smile, its eyes so bright and lifelike, I had the eerie feeling it could speak to me. I admired the detail work in the fingers and hands, and had to turn my own palms over to compare. Tony had carved the same lines in the doll's palms. I wanted to undress it and look for other things, but I didn't want to do that in front of him. It's beautiful, Tony, and a work of art, just as you said it would be. I'm glad you like it. I have copies being made for the window displays, of course, but this is the original, and it's yours forever. Happy birthday, Leigh, he said, leaning down to kiss me. I turned my cheek, but he kissed me quickly on the lips, then left. Alone, I looked at the doll's body. There was even that little birthmark that was under my breast. I set the doll beside me on my bed and stared into its eyes. They twinkled as if she were truly alive and knew some deep secrets, perhaps the secret of my future. How I wish you could talk as well as look beautiful. Then you could be my guardian angel. What a good name for the doll, I thought. Angel. That's what I'll call you from now on, I told her. I thought her smile widened, but of course it was only my wild imagination fed by my hopes and dreams. Mama went overboard with my birthday party. She was determined to do all she could to impress all my friends from Winter Haven and Allendale. It was a beautiful October Sunday, a little warmer than usual. Late that morning, a 5-piece band arrived and set up in the ballroom. The staff brought out long serving tables and tables for the guests. With solid silver bowls of punch, decorations designed by a Boston decorator, professional musicians, memento presents for all my guests, waiters and waitresses everywhere, and a movie to be shown in the small theater, my party was truly overwhelming and quite unlike any birthday party I had ever had when we were all together and living in Boston. Even Tony was taken by surprise. When Joshua arrived, I took his hand to make a big thing of introducing him to my mother. My heart hardened when she didn't even notice I was treating him as someone special. And I realized she had never listened to me when I had spoken about him before. Mama went about, relishing the role of hostess, questioning everyone about his or her family, introducing Tony and bragging about Tatterton toys. She wanted to be sure they all took home good stories about Farthie and Gillian Tatterton. Finally, she announced the showing of the movie in our private movie theater. My friends couldn't believe their ears. She had somehow gotten one of the newest movies before it even reached the movie theaters. Mama had Tony direct everyone to the theater. I squeezed Joshua's hand and indicated that he and I should remain behind to take seats in the rear. Once the movie's underway, I whispered, we'll sneak out so I can show you the maze in the cottage. The lights came down and the picture was begun. We waited a good 15 minutes into the movie before I poked Joshua and the two of us snuck out. We burst out into the daylight and hurried across the grounds to the maze. He held back, his eyes full of wonder as we entered. Are you sure you know how to get out once we go deep in? Joshua asked skeptically. I'm sure, don't worry. Besides, would it be so terrible for you to get lost with me? I teased. I laughed and went forward. He held tightly to my hand as I took us through the corridors and around corners, moving to the right here and to the left there, swiftly and assuredly, until we came out on the other side and faced the cottage. We'll go inside for a moment, and then we'll go back before anyone misses us. I led him up to the front door. After I had first seen it, I explained, I used to dream of living in it with the man I love. When I stepped inside, I was surprised to find that Tony hadn't removed any of his art materials and supplies. The room was still set up like an artist's studio. But it had been so long since we completed the work here, I thought. Why didn't he take everything out? Can we pretend to be two people desperately in love who live here on weekends? I asked Joshua. We don't have to pretend, he replied, the desire behind his hazel green eyes rising to the surface. Our lips touched, and he brought his hands to my shoulders, drawing me to him. I held him at his waist. Happy birthday, Leigh, he whispered. He kissed me again, longer this time. A moan escaped my lips, and my body tingled right down to the tips of my fingers and toes. Leigh, he whispered. I saw such desire in his eyes, a deep, intense look that made me want to hold him and kiss him. I brought his hand to my bosom, but just as I did, the door of the cottage flew open. We both jumped. It was Tony. What are you doing here? He screamed. Why did you bring him here? Why aren't you with your guests watching the movie? I just took a walk with Joshua through the maze, I said quickly, and decided to show him the cottage. It's not right for you to have left your own party, he said more calmly, but still breathing hard. Leigh, I won't tell your mother about this, but I want to talk to you about it later. Yes, Tony, I said, and hurried out the door with Joshua and back through the maze to the movie theater. After my guests had left, and I was alone in my sitting room, Tony came in without knocking. He closed the door behind him and stepped forward. Leigh, I'm sorry I frightened you at the cottage. I know I'm not your real father, but you're a young girl just blossoming. Young men with far more experience can take advantage of a girl like you. Believe me, I know about these things. Joshua's not like that, I snapped. He stepped closer until he could reach out and take my shoulders in his hands. I'd like there to be something special between us. To always have something special between us, he said, his eyes feasting on me. His fingers tightened until they actually began to hurt. You don't understand what sort of power you possess over a man. Power? What was he talking about now? Why was he so intense? You have it already. The same sort of power your mother has. Your beauty and her beauty are mesmerizing. Any man who looks at either of you feels himself weaken. He wants to be a slave to your beauty. I didn't know what to say. What did all this mean? He held me long and tightly. Finally, his arms relaxed and I backed away. He ran his fingers through his hair and smiled. My beautiful portrait doll. My special work of art. We're friends again, then? He asked. Yes, Tony, we're friends. By the time spring came, the portrait dolls had become a multi-million-dollar part of the Tatterton toy empire. Tony never stopped thanking me for being the first model. He told me he was setting aside a share of the profits in a trust fund in my name. Mama thought all this was wonderful and reminded me how silly I had been for hesitating to pose. Tony has made you a star after all, she told me. Isn't that sensational? I supposed it was. I was the envy of all the girls at school. I had a wonderful doll myself, and now I was even making my own fortune because of it. Tony turned out to be a considerate and sincere person after all, I thought. And the negative things I had felt about him, the things that he had done and said that had frightened me, all drifted away. The world that had become gray and dreary after my parents divorced became bright and happy again. I had friends, a boyfriend, a fascinating home, and everything any girl my age could ever want. It wasn't the same for Mama. She was always complaining about one thing or another. She was still upset about what she thought were imperfections in her figure. Finally, in late May, she announced she was going to Switzerland to a wonder spa she had learned about from her wealthy friends. She would be there for at least a month, or however long it took. She left the last week in May. 2 weeks later, my second year at Winter Haven ended. Joshua, William, Jennifer, and I made all sorts of plans for the summer. I hoped I would be able to do half of what we dreamt of doing. I thought I would begin by inviting them all to Farthie the very first weekend back. But when I told Tony, he said it would be better if I waited for my mother's return before I went anywhere or had friends come visit. We had a terrible argument over it at our first dinner together. Even little Troy became very upset. I ran out of the dining room and upstairs to my suite, throwing myself over my bed. I held Angel and sobbed until I could sob no more. A little while later, I looked outside and saw Tony entering the maze. I was sure he was going to the cottage, but why? Why did he keep it as an art studio still? Out of curiosity as well as boredom and frustration, I put Angel back on my bed and hurried downstairs, slipping out a side entrance of Farthie to follow him. Daylight lasted much later now, but the bright orange sun, dropping reluctantly below the horizon, made the world seem so dreamlike and ethereal. Never did it seem as quiet in the corridors of the maze or as dark. I realized I had never gone into it this late in the day, and never at night. How would I find my way back? Still driven by overwhelming curiosity, I forged ahead, finally stepping out on the other side and confronting the cottage. The shades were still drawn, but I could tell that the lights within burned brightly. Could it be that Tony had another young model inside? Carefully, I passed through the front gate and went to the first window. The shade was short of touching the bottom by at least 4 inches. I peered through the opening and gasped. There was a picture on the easel. Tony had drawn and painted in himself, lying naked, beside a female figure that combined so many characteristics of my mother with me. Why did he do that? What did it mean? Before I could leave, he emerged from the kitchen. I gasped again. He was stark naked. He stopped abruptly and looked my way. I felt icicles dripping down my neck, and for a moment I couldn't move. Did he see me? Without any hesitation, I jumped up and ran as fast as I could to the front gate, opened it, and scurried as quickly as my feet would permit until I was charging down the corridor of hedges in the maze. I ran upstairs to my suite, shut the door and leaned against it. I felt ratty, dirty, not only from the flight through the hedges but from what I had seen. I hurried across my suite to my bathroom to run a warm bath. I shook in some bubble bath powder and watched the water turn aqua, the sweet scent circling around me like smoke. I stripped off my clothing as fast as I could and lowered myself into the soothing, tepid, perfumed liquid. It embraced me and I closed my eyes and lay back, moaning with pleasure. I might have fallen asleep in the water for a few minutes, I don't know. I lost track of time. I got out, put on my nightgown, and slipped under my soft blanket, searching for the security and warmth of my own bed. When I gazed out the window to my left, I saw a slice of the silvery moon gleaming through some gauze-like clouds. I reached beside me and took hold of Angel. Then I closed my eyes and let myself sink into sleep. Suddenly my eyes snapped open. There was the distinct sound of someone else's heavy breathing. In the same silvery moonlight that had soothed and sent me into sleep, stood Tony Tatterton, his naked chest glistening. "Oh, Leigh, my Leigh," he whispered. "It's time to bring the painting to life. It's time for me to show you, to teach you." "Please leave," I begged, but he didn't. "You're as beautiful as your mother," he said. reaching out to stroke my hair. More beautiful. He peeled away my blanket. "Leigh," he moaned, "my portrait doll." "Tony, get out. What are you doing?" He slipped in beside me, his hands on my thighs, forcing my nightgown up my body. I pushed out to keep him away, but he was so strong and determined, he had his lips to my ear. "You must experience, understand, be aware," he whispered. "It's my duty, my responsibility, part of the artistic process involved in creating you," he said, convincing himself that what he was doing was right and necessary. "No, stop!" I felt his legs slip in between mine. My panic rose. He pressed forward, driving himself firmly between my legs and then using his thighs to push mine apart. "Stop!" I cried one final time, but it was a futile cry. He forced upon me what should have only been given in love. I bit down on my lower lip and tried to endure. When I arrived at the dining room the next morning, Tony was sitting there reading his Wall Street Journal and sipping coffee. My heart skipped a beat when he lowered the paper to look at me. I gazed at him with as much fury in my eyes as I could muster, but he didn't seem to see it. He smiled brightly. "Good morning, Leigh. It's going to be a beautiful day. Troy tells me you and he are going for a walk on the beach. I might just come along." I looked at Troy. He was drilling half a grapefruit with his fork. His nurse reminded him not to play with his food. Without saying a word, I took my seat. How could Tony be this way, I thought. Did he think I would just forget what he had done? Did he think by his pretending nothing was wrong and nothing was different he could get away with it? Surely he must expect I was going to tell my mother everything. She would want to divorce him and we would leave this place. "I thought perhaps you would like to do some horseback riding today, Leigh," Tony said. "How's that sound?" I glanced at Troy's nurse and Troy. Both were occupied with other things and not listening to Tony. Then I glared at him. "How can you even suggest such a thing?" I demanded through clenched teeth. He shrugged. "I thought you loved horseback riding." "You expect me to go horseback riding with you after what happened last night?" The nurse looked up sharply. Tony's smile faded, but he replaced it quickly with a look of confusion. "What do you mean?" he said. "What happened?" I looked at the nurse. The maid had paused as well and turned a keen ear in our direction. "I just don't want to talk about it right now," I said, and drank my juice. Tony finished his coffee and rose. "I'll see you two out at the beach, perhaps," he said. Then he excused himself and left the table. I finished my breakfast and then started out for the beach with Troy before Tony could join us. Troy and I stayed away all day. Tony wasn't at the house when we returned. When Troy asked after him, Curtis reported that Tony had gone to Boston. Tony did not return for dinner, which made me happy. And then Curtis came in with news of a telegram my mother had sent announcing she would be returning from her European spa late in the day tomorrow. Oh, thank heavens, I thought. I would tell her everything, every little detail, so she would understand what a horror I had gone through and what a horrible man she had married. Tony would pay for what he had done to me. As darkness fell, I became more and more anxious. Wherever I was in the great house, I kept an ear toward the front entrance, anticipating Tony's arrival. Finally, more out of fear than out of fatigue, I retired to my suite. But the moment I closed the door behind me, I felt trapped and vulnerable. Only my mother's bedroom suite had a lock on the door. It was something she had insisted be built in. An idea came to me. I put on my robe, slipped my feet into my slippers, scooped up Angel, and went to my mother's suite, closing and locking the outer door behind me. Not only did I feel safer because of that, but just being in my mother's room, smelling her jasmine perfume gave me a sense of security. I put on one of her nightgowns and dabbed some of her jasmine on my neck. Then I crawled into her bed just the way I used to when I was very little in Boston. I fell asleep. but awoke hours later to the sound and the sight of the lights in the sitting room being turned on. I sat up quickly in my mother's bed. Tony was standing in the doorway. He laughed. I couldn't speak. My heart began to pound. "Locking me out again," he said, and laughed again. "I never told you I had a copy of the key made for the time when I finally grew tired of your ridiculous antics. Shutting me, your husband, out of your bedroom. Well, I'm tired of it now. Now that we're married and you made me sign that ridiculous marriage contract, you think you can drive me away. Well, I won't have it. Not anymore. I've come for what is rightfully mine." He stepped farther in. "Tony," I said in a loud whisper, "I'm not Mama. I'm Leigh." He paused, and there was a long moment of silence. Suddenly he laughed again, this time with a cold, sharp tone. "So you want to be your mother," he said. "You want to be just like her. You crawl into her bed wearing her nightgown and her perfume. You dream of being Gillian, being my wife after all. This is your fantasy." "No, that's not why I came in here. I came in here to keep you away from me. Get out." He came closer. When he was only a few feet away, I smelled the whiskey on his breath. That frightened me even more. I cringed, pulling the blanket up against my body. "Get away from me," I cried when he put his hand on my thigh. "My mother will know of this. She will know what you did to me last night, and she will hate you forever and ever and leave you." But he laughed again. "Who do you think drove me to you? Pushed me forward, encouraged me? Who suggested I use you as my model, my nude model? I'm not stupid. I know why she's done this, but I've accepted it. You will be more beautiful than she is. Don't you think she knows that too? And don't you think it eats away at her?" "No," I screamed. "These are all lies." "Are they?" He laughed. "She thought you and I made love in the cottage and tolerated that." "Liar!" I swung out at him, but he caught my tiny fist in the air and held it. "We don't keep secrets from each other. I tried to get her jealous, to get her to want me more. So I told her you got excited, and demanded I make love to you once I had you pose and once I touched you. Do you know what she said? She said, 'At least you learned from a master, from a consummate lover.' Oh, I know, she was just flattering me, but she really wasn't upset." "She wouldn't say that," I said, shaking my head. "Get away. Get out." He took hold of both my wrists and pulled me to him, kissing me roughly on the lips. I struggled to break free, but he was too strong. All throughout his forced lovemaking, he confused me with my mother, alternatingly calling me Gillian and then moaning Leigh. I saw Angel on the pillow beside me. I struggled to get my right hand free of his and worked it loose enough to take hold of my precious portrait doll, and turned her face away. For in her eyes I saw my own terror and sorrow. After that, I just squeezed my eyelids shut and waited for it to end. In the morning, I rose with the first rays of sunlight and scurried out of my mother's suite and back to my own, where I crawled into bed. Troy came looking for me, but I told him I wasn't feeling well. He went running out to tell the servants. Moments later, Mrs. Carter, one of our older maids, appeared to see what was wrong. All I told her was I wasn't feeling well, and to send my mother up as soon as she arrived. I dozed off a few times until the late afternoon. Finally, I heard a commotion in the corridor outside my suite, and knew Mama had arrived from Europe. The outer door burst open, and Mama came in quickly, sweeping through my bedroom and up to my bed like a gust of fresh air. "Oh, Mama," I cried. I pulled the blanket down and sat up. "A terrible thing has happened, and twice. Tony came into my room and forced himself on me." She came to my side with an amazing burst of speed. At last I had gotten her attention. But then I noticed her eyes. Already they were narrowed to dangerous slits, glittering with coldness. Oh, how I was frightened. "Let me tell you all of it, Please, please listen." "I'm listening," she said, her face contorting with annoyance. When I had finished, she stared at me, a skeptical look still on her face. "Tony picked me up at the airport, Leigh. He told me you asked him to come into your suite, and when he arrived he found you stark naked on your bed, begging him to make love to you." "What? He's lying." "He said he broke free, bawled you out, and left. He also told me about your going to my suite to pretend you were me so he would not refuse you a second time. He said you even put on one of my nightgowns and sprayed yourself with my perfume." She looked at me with triumph, sniffing the air. "That is my nightgown, isn't it? And you are wearing my perfume." "Oh, Mama, I did all this just to be close to you. I was so afraid." When she looked at me again, I could see her disbelief. She didn't even attempt to hide it. In that moment, a surge of hatred flowed through my blood. Never before had I felt this way toward Mama. Oh, I could see it all. Mama wasn't about to jeopardize her position as mistress of Farthingale Manor. So what if she had gotten Tony to sign a settlement agreement entitling her to half his fortune? Without his name, she was nothing. Nothing. If she chose to believe me and divorced Tony, she would lose the respectability and privilege she had as Mrs. Tony Tatterton. Invitations would no longer arrive. Boston society would close its doors in her face, and she'd be reduced to being a poor girl from Texas, allowed only to look in from the outside. "Leigh," she said, her eyes small, "do you expect me to believe that my husband would turn to my daughter, a girl just becoming a woman, when he has me?" "Really," she declared. "Now get hold of yourself. I want you to bathe and dress and come down to dinner." And with that she left the room. A few days later, Daddy called from Houston, Texas. "Daddy, I've got to see you," I said desperately. "I'll call you as soon as I get to Boston and we'll all meet for dinner," he said. "I'm due there the day after tomorrow." "Daddy, try to meet me by yourself," I pleaded. "Leigh, I'm married now, and Mildred is a part of everything I do. She likes it that way. She gets very upset if I exclude her from anything, and she wants so much to get to know you." "All right, Daddy. Call me as soon as you arrive," I said. I had no choice and no one else to turn to. I woke up early on the morning of Daddy's arrival in Boston. I thought I would have Miles drive me into the city the moment Daddy phoned. Just before lunch, Curtis called me to the phone. "Hello?" I said. "Miss VanVoreen? My name is Chester Goodman. I work for your father, and he has asked me to call you. He sends his regrets. He had to fly out to the coast on an emergency and won't be able to see you today. He said to tell you he will phone you the first chance he gets." I hung up in a daze. It seemed to take me forever to go up the stairway. I went to my bed and lay back on the pillow. My head had begun to ache and my stomach felt funny. How could I ever feel any worse than this, I thought. But I did, and as soon as the next morning. I hadn't gotten my eyes open a few seconds before it came over me, this wave of nausea. And then something struck me. I had forgotten all about it because I had been so occupied with other things this past month and a half. My period was overdue. And now morning sickness. Oh no, I thought. I'm pregnant. I waited 3 more days before telling my mother, hoping and praying what I feared wasn't true. When the words came out of my mouth, they surprised me. But there they were. "Mama, I'm pregnant." We were both silent, startled at the truth. There would be a baby. Tony's evil act would have consequences, and now God would make us all pay for one madman's lust. Mama simply stared at me a moment, and then a tight, small smile appeared on her face. How I wanted to wipe it off. She shook her head, her eyes turning small and hateful. "It's your own fault, you little fool." What? I couldn't believe my ears. You flaunted yourself about, tempting him, tormenting him with your young blossoming body. And now you have the result. The horrible, embarrassing, terrible result. I didn't flaunt myself about, Mama. You know. What if this gets out? Just think what it will do to me, what my friends will think. I will never be invited to a single dinner. We'll be ostracized from society. I didn't want to be the model, I cried. Don't you remember? You made me do it. And afterward, when I came to you, and after I tried so hard to bring you up right, to understand how women and men should be with each other, how a woman has to hold on to her virtue to win the respect and admiration of men. I told you, she screamed. Good girls don't go all the way. Her scream vibrated through me, shattering whatever feelings of love and respect for her remained. I couldn't stand it any longer. You liar, I screamed back at her. You hypocrite, sitting there and condemning me for being promiscuous and going all the way. I know the truth about you. I overheard Grandma Jana talking to you just before you married Tony. And I know Daddy isn't my real father. That you slept with another man and got pregnant and married Daddy without telling him the truth so he would think I was his child. Why, that's... She sat back, a dazed look on her face. That's true, I said. All true. How dare you speak to me like this? I'm your mother. No, you're not, I said, shaking my head and backing away from her. I have no mother, and I have no father. I allowed myself to be just as ugly with my words as she had been with hers. You thought you could have it all, didn't you? Only the finest, I spat out. A handsome young husband, a luxurious estate, a designer wardrobe, and a specially selected mistress for your own husband. When did you realize that your beauty wouldn't last forever and would start fading? I laughed in her face. I can't stand you anymore. You don't care about anything but yourself and your precious face. Well, let me tell you something, Gillian Tatterton. The game is over. Now you're going to be a grandmother. Does that make you feel young? No matter how young you look, you'll never escape the fact that you're a grandmother, and the only person you have to blame is yourself. I turned and ran from her suite, ran from her lies and hypocritical eyes, ran from a woman I no longer recognized or loved. I slammed the door of my room behind me, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't cry again in this evil place. I hated this place, hated what happened here, hated what it had turned me into. All I knew was I had to get away from its sins, lies, and its false smiles. I threw open my closet door and grabbed a suitcase. Without planning what I would take, I grabbed something here, something there, throwing the garments into the suitcase roughly. I didn't care about my beautiful clothes or my precious jewelry. I didn't care about pictures or mementos. I just wanted to get away as quickly as I could. I scooped Angel into my arms and charged out of my suite with my suitcase swinging in my hand. It was only when I reached the bottom of the staircase that I stopped to question what I was doing, where I was going. I couldn't just walk out of Farthing. I was miles and miles from anywhere. Grandma Jana, I thought. I would go to her. But that took money. I looked in my pocketbook for my wallet and found I had barely $20, not enough to finance a trip to Texas. I recalled where Tony kept some money in his office and went in to get it. Why not, I thought. If anyone should pay, it should be Tony. There was nearly $200 there, hardly a fortune, but enough to get me on the road. I stepped out the front door. It was very warm, and there were big high clouds scattered across the deep blue sky. A slight, soft breeze caressed my face. The world welcomed me, encouraged me to come out of the dark, enchanted kingdom called Farthingale. Lucky for me, Miles was in front polishing the car. He looked up sharply when I walked up to him. "To the train station, Miles." "Don't tell me my mother forgot to tell you this morning." "No, she didn't. I'm going to visit my grandmother," I said. "I'm afraid we will have to leave immediately so that I will not miss my train." He opened the door for me and I slipped in quickly. Then he got into the limousine and started the engine. I watched the front door, half expecting my mother to suddenly appear and start screaming, demanding to know what was happening. But she didn't emerge, and Miles started down the long, winding driveway. I gazed out the side window and suddenly saw little Troy and his nurse coming back from a walk to the beach. In my excitement and anger, I had forgotten all about him and what my leaving would mean to him. "Oh no," I muttered. "Troy." "Miles," I cried, "please stop for a moment. I forgot to say goodbye to Troy." As soon as the car came to a halt, I stepped out and called and waved to Troy. He came running up to me, his little pail swinging in his hand. "I've got to go away for a while, Troy." I took his little hand into mine and squatted so I could look into his eyes. "You be good and try to rest and eat right while I'm away, okay?" "But when are you coming back?" "Not for a while, Troy." "Are you really coming back, Leigh?" he asked softly. "Promise?" "Cross my heart." "Come, kiss me goodbye." "Please," I begged. He relented and put his small arms around my neck. I kissed his cheek and held him tightly. Then he pecked mine like a tiny bird. He reached into his pail and took out a conch. "Take this with you and you won't forget me," he said. I took it. "Okay." "Thank you." "Put it to your ear and you'll hear the ocean and me," he promised, and turned to run back to his nurse. I watched him for a moment and then got into the car. "Please let's go, Miles," I said, "as fast as we can." We rolled on through the main gate and under the great arch, but I didn't look back. Instead, I put Troy's conch to my ear and listened to the ocean and heard his little cry. He was calling after me. "Leigh! Leigh!" I had never traveled anywhere all by myself, but I didn't show Miles any of my fear or indecision. When we reached the station, I took my suitcase quickly and walked inside, stopping to wave goodbye to him once. I asked the ticket seller for a one-way ticket to Fullerton, Texas. Since Fullerton wasn't on his charts, he asked me what city it was near. I didn't have any idea and began to panic. "Dallas," I blurted out, hoping he wouldn't suspect I was running away from home and call a policeman over. He told me I would have to take the train to Atlanta, then lay over several hours there for the train to Dallas. When the train came rumbling in, I found my car quickly and took a seat by the window. Then I put my suitcase overhead, set Angel beside me snugly, and waited anxiously. Finally, the train began to pull away. My heart thumped in rhythm with the train's wheels as they turned on the tracks. The station disappeared behind us, and we shot out into the twilight, heading south, heading away from the only world I had ever known. The Atlanta terminal was bigger than the one in Boston, and there seemed to be twice, maybe 3 times the number of people rushing about. I had 5 hours to wait before the train left for Dallas. I bought a magazine and found a small lounge area off to the right of my platform. I sat on a bench and counted my money. I didn't have much left and hoped I had enough for lunch and dinner. "I bet I could turn one of your $1 bills into a $5 bill, someone said. And I looked up and into the most radiant black eyes I had ever seen. The young man standing in front of me had thick, rich, ebony hair and bronze skin. He was tall and handsome, with broad, strong shoulders that made the seams of his thin shirt strain. I don't know why I did it, but I handed this stranger one of my precious dollars. He did a little magic trick, and before my eyes he turned it into a $5 bill. He handed it to me. "The way you were counting your money, right down to the penny, you looked like you needed an extra $4, he said. "Is that right?" Heat came into my face. "Well, I'm not accustomed to taking money from strangers, even magic money," I replied, thrusting the $5 bill back at him. "Okay, I won't be a stranger then," he said, leaning back and reaching out his right hand. "My name's Thomas Luke Casteel, but most everyone just calls me Luke." I told him my name and we started talking. He had such a colorful way of speaking, and he sounded real, down to earth, honest. I couldn't help but like him, and the more we talked, the more I envied him for the simple life he had led and the simple world he had grown up in. Luke was 17 and came from a place in the mountains of West Virginia called the Willies. He was now working in a nearby circus feeding and washing down the animals. Since I had so much time to kill, I took him up on his offer to show me the circus. He promised to bring me back in plenty of time to catch my train to Dallas. We got into his old pickup and were at the circus in no time. All the Carney people knew Luke, and from the way most waved to him and greeted him, I could tell they all liked him very much. We rode the Ferris wheel, ate hot dogs, hamburgers, and French fries, and Luke won a pudgy little black teddy bear for me at the baseball throw game. "It's not as pretty as your doll Angel," he said, "but it's a lucky one." "It's very beautiful and very cuddly," I said, pressing it to my cheek. "I love it." "Thank you, Luke." I watched him feed the elephants, and then he went to wash up since we were going to take in the clown show and the acrobats. "Can't go around looking bad when I'm with such a beautiful woman," he said. Although he smiled when he said it, I sensed he meant it, and that made my heart flutter. I guess the only thing I didn't like about Luke was how much beer he drank. He put away one after another, and I saw how it was beginning to make his face red. But as soon as he noticed my concern, he threw away the cup of beer he had just bought and told me, "I won't drink any more today." I was having such a wonderful time that the hours turned into minutes and the minutes into seconds. I lost track of time and place. I looked at my watch and realized we'd never be able to make it back to the station in time for me to get my train. Luke tried his best to get me there anyway, but when we arrived, the train was pulling out. We started back to the circus in Luke's truck. Luke said I could spend the night on a bed of hay and that he'd bring me to the station again in the morning. I felt like I was stuck on a merry-go-round, spinning from one side to another but getting nowhere. What more can happen to me, I thought. I was unable to hold back the river of tears that sought to flow freely down my cheeks. I confessed to Luke that I was running away and spilled out the whole story, everything, even modeling for the portrait doll, and how Tony had raped me, and how my mother didn't believe me and that now I was pregnant. "I thought these kind of things happened only to the hillbilly people in the Willies," Luke said. "I guess being all that rich ain't always what it's cracked up to be." Then his voice turned stern. I wish I had that Tony Tatterton right here. I'd twist his head until his neck twanged like a broken guitar string. I laughed. I couldn't help it. He had such a colorful imagination. "I'll get you a room in a motel so you can be comfortable," Luke said. "A bed of hay in a circus tent ain't no place for a girl who's having a baby," he declared firmly. It was a small room with drab gray walls and dusty-looking light green curtains. While I cleaned up, Luke went to a restaurant down the road to get me some hot tea and a muffin. "You gotta have some nourishment," he said with a look of concern. I had to smile. He wanted to do things for me, and he was sincere. I had put myself in a terrible spot, but I had met a true guardian angel. Maybe it all had to do with magic after all. Maybe by running away from the evil world of Farthie, I had escaped from the evil spell that had fallen over me. Sleep came over me fast, but in the middle of the night I woke with a start and forgot where I was. I couldn't help crying out in fear. Seconds later, I felt Luke beside me in the dark. Angel, Angel, he said, stroking my hair. It's all right, you're safe. It's Luke, I'm right here with you. Don't you worry about a thing. I don't want you to ever worry about a thing, he added in a whisper. I awoke in the morning and found Luke beside me in my bed. I had fallen asleep in his arms, and I had never felt as safe or as happy. I know you're carrying your stepfather's baby, he said to me, but no one else has to know that. Let everyone think it's mine. I want it to be mine because I want you to be mine. What do you mean? I understood, but I had to hear him say it. I mean, I want to marry you, to have you forever and ever as my angel. I thought it all out during the night. I want to take you back to the Willies with me, start all over. I got plans and ideas. I want to earn enough money to get my own farm started, and I can do it too, Angel. Oh, I ain't saying it won't be hard in the beginning, he went on before I could interrupt. Real hard. We'll have to stay with my folks for a spell, but I'll work day and night earning enough money to get us that down payment so we can start our own home. You'll love it there, Angel, I promise you will. It's a pure free life, a life in nature, a life away from corruption and people who care more about themselves than their loved ones. Luke embraced me and we kissed. You're my angel, and angels come from heaven, he said. Say, he added, smiling, if we have a girl, that might not be a bad name for her. Heaven. What do you think? I loved him for saying, if we have a girl. Oh, yes, Luke. Heaven would fit her real fine. Why, we'll give her your name, too. Then we can call her Heaven Leigh Casteel, he said. He laughed, and we rode on toward the sunlight and the promise. A journey that had begun in anger, fear, and hopelessness had suddenly become a journey of love and hope. My tears were different now. They were tears of happiness, and they were warmer. I held on tightly to Thomas Luke Casteel. My heart beat happily. There was magic in the air. I turn the page, but there is nothing more written. However, I find a paper folded between the last page in the diary and the cover. I open it carefully, for it is so old it feels like it will crumble in my fingers. It's a letter from a detective agency. Dear Mr. Tatterton, as you know, I did locate your stepdaughter in the hills of West Virginia. In my last report, I described the conditions under which she was living, and I did report that she was pregnant. I am afraid I have bad news. Yesterday, my assistant, whom I left on the case, called in to report that he had learned of your daughter's death. Apparently, she died in childbirth. He told me she did not have professional medical attention and gave birth in her mountain cabin. I am sorry. He did report that the child lived, and it was a girl. I await further instructions. Sincerely yours, L. Stanford Banning, Private Investigator. Annie! It's Luke calling. For a moment I can't catch my breath. The air is so stale and so stifling in this old dusty suite. I'm in here, Luke. In a moment he is in the doorway. Everyone who is coming has arrived, Annie, and they're all asking after you. It's time, Luke says. I nod. What have you been doing, he asks. Just sitting here, reading. Reading what? A story. A strange, sad, but beautiful story. My grandmother's story. I hold back my tears, but Luke sees them in my eyes. Annie, let's go. This place is haunted by sadness and sorrow. You don't belong here. I smile. How handsome Luke is. As handsome as his grandfather must have been. He reaches out for me, and I take his hand and stand up. We start out and I stop. What's wrong, he asks. Nothing, I say. I just want to put this back. Somehow I feel it belongs here among all the other memories. I put the diary back in the cloth bag and return it to the drawer. Then I look around once more and hurry to join Luke. We descend the great stairway. I pause. I thought I heard a little boy's laugh. I even think I hear him calling, "Leigh, Leigh." I smile. "What is it?" Luke asks. I was just imagining my father as a little boy calling after my grandmother to play with him. We continue down the stairs and through the great entry hall. Is that music behind me? Angel's birthday party? A piano concert for wealthy guests? My father practicing his Chopin? Or is it just the wind finding its way into the great house? Maybe it's all of it. I go out with Luke and close the great door behind me, leaving the question and the answer with all the others in the great house of Farthingale Manor.
There's a house where roses grow, but nothing blooms inside. Every room has secrets, every heart has something to hide. I learned to walk where floorboards creak, never asking what I'd hear. They dressed me up in innocence and taught me love was fear. They gave me dreams behind locked doors and promises made of lies. But I saw the truth behind their smiles every time they looked away.
Building into one soaring high note.